Going live.
Is it a fun day
Yes.
when you're not
Yes.
having to like worry about your own race?
We're good?
It's fun to meet again.
Okay. Yeah, I always consider it like
We're good?
like Christmas.
Hey, welcome to a very special edition of the Dan Parsons Show, a live stream for Election Night 2026. And our live stream of the primary election starts right now.
All good work is done in defiance of management.
I'm gonna tell you the truth whether you like it or not.
Go ahead, give me the finger.
The Dan Parsons Show.
Hey, you know, what we should do is have a contest to see who can identify the voices in that intro. It's a great intro. Hey, I want to thank the crew. I'll do that throughout the evening, but you wouldn't believe the crew it takes to put this show together. So just real quick, Ike Simonis is our on-site producer. Mr. Chase Porter at the news desk as our news director.
Hey, Chase.
Darren Litchie, on-site technical lead. Vince Rule, live stream production. And Chris Steffen, live stream production. And it's so important to have, anytime you throw a party, you should have a couple of hosts. So Terry Hendrickson, Clay Naff, thanks for being our hosts. And we've got a small audience here, but hopefully all of you are tuning in to find out what the numbers are, to find out what's going to happen on election night. We've got some great analysis that we're going to do. We have some candidates who are going to stop by both in the studio and online throughout the evening. So buckle up. If you haven't voted yet, you've got about a little less than 30 minutes to get to your polling booth and vote before the polls close at 8 o'clock. We've got a couple of great hosts, people that you know. If you were here for our 100th anniversary, you have seen my co-host for the night, Mr. Ryan Horn from Washington, D.C. He just texted me. He's in an Uber headed back to a secret bunker, he told me. But live here in the studio, our friend and yours, Nebraska State Senator Danielle Conrad. Danielle,
Hello.
welcome.
Hi. Happy Election Day.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dan. So excited to be here.
Well, thanks. Of all the things that you could be doing tonight, you're here with us. So thank you very much, Senator. And I think what's really amazing, you're up for re-election this year, but you scared them all away. You don't have an opponent.
We'll have to wait and see when the polls close today whether or not there's a hefty protest vote or a last-minute write-in attempt. But this was a first-of-its-kind experience for me, having been on the ballot many go-arounds. I actually won my election after the filing deadline closed because nobody stepped forward to run in our district. So I definitely have been using that opportunity of being unopposed to stay really engaged with my constituents, to make sure, even though there isn't a hot race in our district, to know what they're thinking about, to make sure they know how to contact me. And then I've had some extra time to help out other candidates across the state,
some
and
social
that's been
media.
a blast.
Yeah, that's really
That's been a
cool.
blast.
Yeah, well, we're going to get into a lot of different things here this evening. I want to talk about some of those legislative races, but I think one of the first things I want to do is let's bring on Eric Moyer. Eric is a candidate for CD1, the congressional seat right here in Lincoln, America. Eric, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Dan. It is an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know I've never been a candidate. Don't ask me. It's never going to happen. But I've been behind the scenes with candidates many nights like this. And it's a weird day, isn't it?
Very. It's a balance of butterflies and anticipation. I'd say it's kind of like You're waiting to open Christmas presents, only it's at the end of the day instead of right when you wake up.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens. It's going to be a fun night. I'd say it's like watching the NBA playoffs, opening Christmas gifts, and I don't know, and like your birthday all rolled into one thing. So we'll see.
Yeah. Danielle, do you remember your first campaign?
Oh my gosh. Well, sure. Of course, I got my start really early and got the political spark back in elementary school when Kayor and Helen Busalis were running together. So I remember watching returns at my parents' house and being allowed to stay up a little bit later to catch some of those way, way, way back in the day. And then my own campaigns over the years, I usually stay pretty close to home. I really like to not have cameras in my face and really want to nerd out with all of the spreadsheets and the returns and just be there with those that are closest to you, because you never know what's going to happen.
Right.
But it's the anticipation, it's the excitement, it's the culmination of so much hard work, and it's just great. I mean, the candidates are working so hard, the families are deeply invested, the staff has put their heart and soul into the endeavor, the volunteers are excited, and then the voters get to have their say. And we voted late tonight, right after dinner, and there was just a fantastic turnout in our precinct, that kind of after dinner rush, that after work rush. And I loved seeing the demographics and loved seeing the energy, even on a low turnout kind of prediction for this primary.
Yeah. Eric, what's something that you learned during the camp? This is your first run for political office, right?
It is. This was my first run. I mean, and I would describe it as being like strapped to the front of a freight train, just hurtling down the tracks. It's been a really phenomenal experience being able to get out into the community and talk to people and really understand their needs. The one thing that's really surprised me about all of this is actually how much fun I've been having. And maybe I shouldn't.
That's the way it should
you
be.
should.
Yeah, that's the way it should be.
But I really am having a ball, and it's, getting acquainted and getting to meet so many fantastic people. And Nebraska is just an amazing place. And the more you get to see of it, the more, incredible restaurants and communities that you get out into, the better. It's great. Grassroots campaigning is the bomb.
Because your hometown is up north, right?
Yeah, my hometown of Madison, Nebraska, it's about 1,200 to 1,400 people, vacillates a little bit, but it's been really a tremendous reward being able to get up there and to my old stomping grounds around Norfolk as well, and just getting to be reacquainted with friends and extended family up there as part of this process has just been its own reward.
What's one thing during the campaign, Eric, that maybe you didn't expect?
Oh, golly. Well, one of the things I didn't expect was for people to care about my opinion so much. That kind of, it kind of struck me as odd to suddenly find myself in a position where obviously my opinion about, pending legislation is going to have bearing if elected. And that to me has been kind of an adjustment and really sort of a shocker. But it allows me to have a much more crafted and intentional response when it comes to an opinion about, whatever the issue might be, because I know that so many people not only are listening, but so many people are depending on me to make a very informed decision.
Right. Well, I want to compliment you and Chris, and your opponent, and I've told you this, I think, before, of just what a positive race you've run. And any of us that have been involved in politics for very long, it isn't the way it has to be.
Right. Well, it's only as ugly as you make it, right? And I think Chris and I have made a real effort to demonstrate that you can approach politics from a standpoint where you're emphasizing the issues and not each other. And really, really focusing on trying to make it a process where we're informing voters about our different positions and trying to be as transparent as possible, as opposed to slinging mud and just making it nasty, because nobody really benefits from that. And ultimately, we want to do what's best for the people of the state of Nebraska. And, I think that's one thing I'm really, really grateful for when it comes to this race, is that I have an opponent that cares as much about this state as I do.
Yeah. Danielle, do you remember any war stories from campaigns that you can talk about in a way that is not stressful?
So many. I mean, some of those might have to be published posthumously, but and to Eric's point, and Dan, from your travels and deep experiences, and I can't wait till Ryan weighs in, but every campaign takes on its own kind of tenor and tone. But I'll tell you one thing that I think is really remarkable about campaigning right now. When I first got started, social media wasn't really a thing.
Right,
These
right.
little supercomputers weren't a part of our lives. I mean, it was still the newspaper in hand every day, and then those, quintessential legacy news programs that were out there, and a lot of retail politics. And so that was really a formative experience to me. And I came up as a field kid working on a bunch of other campaigns, and that really grassroots effort is what's always been my favorite part of campaigning. And I'll tell you now, being out there now in the digital age with social media, I think it's even more important. I actually think the retail politics and the grassroots connection and the door-to-door and the town halls and the little coffees and whatever it might be are even more important, because voters are sick of the noise and the division, just like the theme that you have for your programming, Dan.
Yeah.
And they're sick of the doom scrolling, and they're sick of the toxicity, and we open up conversations. I mean, I've been knocking doors all over eastern Nebraska this spring, and we talk to Democrats and Republicans and independents in the legislative races, as it should be, because we're nonpartisan. And that experience will absolutely reinvigorate and restore your hope in humanity and democracy, because we're so close. We're so close together, and there's some emergent themes that I think are going to be real interesting for this election
Well,
year.
it is. We've watched around across the country. I'll put this in positive spin, I guess. The enthusiasm for candidates, the enthusiasm for these races. We've seen across the country that the Republican Party is trending. They're having trouble with messaging. Let's just put it that way. And we've got a president that's, we're in an unpopular war, and a president that is not as popular as he once was. And so I hope, instead of people, and there's a candidate for another congressional seat here in Nebraska that has coined the phrase "pissed off mom." And I think that kind of indicates that a lot of us are just frustrated with politics these days. And so how do we react to that as an electorate? And hopefully it means we get off our duff and we're voting today.
Yeah, anger can definitely be a map. It can light a spark. But I'll tell you, I don't think that alone is a strategy. I think it has to be based on issues. I think it has to be based on ideas. And people want to know how candidates are going to deliver for kitchen table issues. We're literally in the middle of an affordability crisis. Have you filled up your gas tank recently?
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I mean, it is really hitting people, along with childcare and healthcare, with the loss of the ACA credits, and just a bunch of other kind of scary things happening in our economy. And I think that those issues are just so salient for voters right now, and candidates need to get real specific real fast. Not time for platitudes on websites about, we're going to bring down the cost of things. Really, how?
Right.
How?
And when it comes to policy, the thing that is really kind of mind-blowing to me in all these conversations that we're having, when you get out into the community and you're talking to people, is the level of sophistication of their questions. Our electorate is informed. Our electorate is really focused on the issues. They have a clear understanding of how this impacts their pocketbooks when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, when it comes to a war in Iran. They're very, very familiar with what tariffs are doing to ag prices. And there's really no pulling the wool over their eyes. There's no demonstrating that. To me, the biggest demonstration is that the economy as well as policy are now inextricably linked, and voters get it. They get it from bottom to the top. And I think it's a good thing for us and for our democracy that so many people are so much more informed on how policy is connected to kitchen table issues. And I think that's going to be a real guide in how this election is going to go.
Yeah. Hey, I just want to remind people who are tuning in, this is our live stream coverage of primary election 2026. We've got about 14 minutes left until we get some numbers. The polls close. So we're going to be covering answering
on
that.
camera when the first returns come in, or are you going to be jutting out of screen?
Well, it depends. Well, it depends what those results are.
It's all about timing.
Yeah.
We're going to go to our news desk here in a moment when those polls close, and our news director, Chase Porter, will give us those numbers. And I'll just want to tell you, if you're scrolling through social media, we are live on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, X. I still call it Twitter.
Yeah.
And the TikTok. How about that? We've got it covered. So, and if you're watching us on one of those platforms and you've got a question or a comment, please weigh in, and our moderators will give me that. So we've got a few minutes here before our next guests come in. We're waiting for Ryan Horn, who's going to join us from Washington, D.C. And
what races are you watching tonight? Because I'm laser focused on the congressionals. Got a hot ticket up in CD2, obviously contested race down here in the first.
Yeah, I mean,
there
there's
are a ton of amazing legislative candidates all across the state that have been working really hard, that I've been really impressed with. And then some of those regent races are really interesting.
those regent races, and we've
That would be
interviewed
really
some of those
fun.
candidates.
And shout out to the local candidates. And I know we have some in the audience here today that don't grab a lot of the headlines like the top of the ticket, but do critical work in community and public service. And I think those are always really exciting too. But I've been thinking a lot about the dynamics of this particular primary because, say, for example, in CD2, you have everybody under the sun talking to every Democratic voter that's, ever registered out there to try and get their message out, to try and win this primary. And then on the Republican side, it's muted, right? Because they have cleared the field and Brinker Harding is the nominee. And I think that hits really in a very interesting way for some of those down ballot races.
You're right. That's a great analysis.
Especially the nonpartisan ones like the legislature,
Yes.
where there's not a lot of energy and excitement because of Trump, because of affordability crisis, because of the war. There's a cleared field on the R side. And so I'm really interested to see how that impacts turnout for some of those nonpartisan races in the legislature.
Yeah, that's a great observation. And obviously, even though it's a nonpartisan body and elected on a nonpartisan basis, obviously both political parties get involved. But what I found interesting, and Eric, feel free to weigh in. Obviously, you're a registered Democrat running in a Democratic primary. But what I've really found interesting is this wave of independence of not only the voters. I mean, there's been increasing amount of independents, nonpartisan voters, not only in Nebraska, but around the country, for dissatisfaction within the two political parties. And now we're seeing more of those candidates declaring their nonpartisan status and running for office. And not just the nonpartisan one, but obviously United States Senate. I talked to your former colleague, Brett Lindstrom, the other day, and Brett's now an independent. And so I'm just curious, Eric, out on the campaign trail, how do you, because obviously you've got a list of people that you're knocking doors on, who you're talking with. What is that? How have you handled those nonpartisan or independent candidates?
Don't forget the Democratic primary is open.
Right.
We allow independents to come into that process and help select our nominees for the fall. So,
and by the way, I've gotten that question a lot this week from people because they're still confused hey, can I go in and ask as a Republican for an independent? It's like, nope. They don't allow that in the Republican Party.
We'll talk about open primaries at some point. And I know Mayor Josh Moenning is coming on board. And he's a great proponent and advocate for that as well. But it's just never made sense to me. Why in the heck are the taxpayers paying for a closed party activity? I just don't understand it from that kind of just really pragmatic perspective. But I'm going to jump out of the way so Eric can answer the question.
Well, in thinking about independence, and I think you brought up a really important point where it's not enough to just target Democrats in this district. We're outnumbered by the number of Republicans here in CD1. So really the only way to make the math if you want to win this seat is you need to start talking to independent and nonpartisan voters. So it's been a huge focus of our campaign since day one. And those conversations going door to door, it's somewhat nuanced as far as the same messaging between Democrats and independents and nonpartisans, but really ultimately, the affordability crisis is impacting everybody in the same way and to the same degree. So it's economic problems are nonpartisan, and these problems need to be resolved. So, ultimately, you're having the same conversation, whether I'm knocking on a door of a Democrat or an independent, sometimes a blended household with a Democrat and a Republican. I love those conversations, by the way. They're actually some of the most fun.
And I think as I've been out helping legislative candidates, and we do talk to everybody, right? Republicans, Democrats, independents, which is great. And the emergent themes, everything related to affordability, sick of the divisiveness and the toxicity in our politics, sick of the loudest voices on both sides of the political spectrum. And oh my goodness, go talk to Nebraska voters. They are very, very upset with Governor Pillen and Attorney General Hilgers and the majority of the Nebraska legislature, who's really thumbed their nose at the will of the voters on vouchers, on minimum wage, on medical cannabis, on sick leave. That is, it doesn't matter if I'm knocking in a rural community, a conservative door, a progressive door, whatever the demographics. That has been just a through line, top of mind for voters, and they are rightly frustrated and dissatisfied with how elected officials in this state are treating their votes.
Right, and when better than 70% of the voters all say we want access to medical marijuana, you need to listen because they understood the verbiage on the document when they signed it. There's no question there, and their opinion is very clear. And I think it is. I think it is a risky maneuver to defy that for any. We'll see.
Yeah.
And I really hope that on those very issues, and I know the voters are asking the tough questions and doing their homework, but every single person on the ballot, particularly for legislature, particularly for governor, for attorney general, what are you going to do when we vote on something? Are you going to honor the will of the people for real? Really honor it, whether you agree or not. Or are you going to try and repeal it? Are you going to try and put roadblocks in place and delay and undercut and undermine? And I think that this is just, no spin zone, right, Dan? Like, this is a very simple question. No matter what, whether you agree with it or not, are you going to support access to medical cannabis? Are you going to stop messing around on school vouchers? Are you going to put forward modest, meaningful increases in the minimum wage? It shouldn't be that hard. And if a candidate can't answer simply, that should be a huge red flag to the voter.
And these questions they ask are yes or no questions. Like they expect a yes or no answer, not a nuanced paragraph that dances around the issue and kind of saves you from having to make a decision. They expect a yes or no, and they expect it at the door.
Yeah.
That's it.
Eric, we're going to cut you loose here in a minute here.
I hate to interject. We have our special guest, Ryan Horn, on the line.
I was just going to introduce Mr. Ryan Horn. Yeah. Hey, Mr. Ryan Horn, Bullhorn Communications, all the way from Washington, D.C. Welcome, my man.
There he is. Hi, Ryan.
Good to see you.
We can see him.
Lincoln to D.C.
He can't hear us yet. We'll get him hooked up here, Mr. Ryan Horn, all the way from Washington, D.C. Anyway.
For a second. It's usually me having tech trouble, so I've been a bad influence on Ryan, but.
Well, Eric, first of all, I want to thank you. I want to thank you for running. I want to thank you for being so generous with your time throughout this campaign to our audience. I know we've enjoyed it very much. And so enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll be watching, and feel free to check back in later. And
where are you watching returns?
We're going to be at the Jane Snyder Trail Center here in Lincoln, Nebraska,
Beautiful.
Otherwise known as the Hub Cafe.
Yeah.
So should be a great time. Yeah.
A beautiful sunny evening. You can get outside. Great food, great farm to table stuff. Centrally located.
Absolutely.
That's beautiful. That's a gem.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. But thank you, Dan. It's
Eric,
always a pleasure. Really appreciate it.
We'll stay in touch.
Danielle, great.
Good to see you. Yeah. Good luck.
Take care.
Okay. Well, the room is filling up, and we've got some more special guests to get to. About 4 minutes until the polls close, and we're trying to get Ryan here. We can see Ryan, and it seems like he can see us, but I don't think we can hear each other yet. So, it's technology.
Perfect. I have the floor, Ryan. No worries.
Nope.
There he is.
I heard your
sparked him
voice.
into action.
We're waiting for him to be able to hear you guys. Right?
Oh, okay.
You can't hear us. Okay.
Okay, Dan, so how do you normally watch returns? I know you've worked on a ton of campaigns. You've always been an expert, astute observer. Have you ever done it live? This is a brand new, this might be a first.
We did last fall for the election. Certainly not this operation. Pretty amazing. But I typically like to be in a crowd, you know me.
Yes,
yes. And when I was working for candidates, you were drilled into the computer, and everybody has a role in campaigns. And, and I typically worked on, governor campaigns and United States Senate. And so those were big deals.
I remember one of my first campaigns as like a paid staffer in college, maybe 20 years old. And I was working for Nelson for Senate in 96. And we saw the 3 o'clock returns come in, and we saw that the Democratic turnout was a lot lower than it should have been. And so everybody kind of went into panic mode.
Was that 2000?
So it was 96, actually.
Oh, yeah.
So I have this very distinct memory of running through this neighborhood just east of the University of Nebraska, Lincoln's campus, which is like a core historic neighborhood, Democratic stronghold, like up until 8 o'clock at night, that November night, just trying to find every possible vote that we could to turn people out. And so that campaign didn't go our ways, but it was like a very formative experience in never squandering a minute while the polls are open.
Well, that's just it. Was it the 2000 race, the Senate race with Nelson and Stenberg? Does that sound right?
That may be. I took off about 2000 to 2003 from active campaigning when I was in law school, just to make sure I wouldn't flunk out. But yeah, that may have been. I remember working for Ben back in 96 on the coordinated campaign when he lost to Chuck Hagel, who's fantastic Nebraskan, wonderful senator.
Yeah, Don Stenberg was in that race too. In the primary.
That could have been maybe the primary, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah, it was. Ryan Horn, can you hear us, my man?
I can hear you guys.
Yay! Mr. Ryan Horn, just in time. We've got about 60 seconds till polls close, and we can start looking at numbers. Welcome, my friend.
Thank you.
Ryan, what are you watching tonight? Are you all eyes on Nebraska? I know you have clients all over the country and national projects, but where are you focused tonight?
I'm really only looking at Nebraska, and honestly, there's not that much to look at here.
Yeah. Right.
There's in my mind, it's kind of with the exception of Nebraska 2, which is a really big event. But beyond that, it's a little bit of a sleepy affair, I think, where we'll kind of see who maybe gets through some primaries to face some other people, but the Nebraska 2 race should be interesting for sure.
Yeah, I'll tell you, Ryan, I agree. And Dan and I were talking about that a little bit before, but with such low turnout and a lot of uncontested races, it's going to be, I think, kind of challenging to glean a lot of lessons once the final votes are tallied up tonight. But we'll have the field set for November and maybe get a few clues about how some of those races might shake out in the over the summer and into the fall.
Yeah. What do you make of that CD2 race, Ryan? You're from Omaha. Have you been following?
Well, yeah, I am an Omaha resident. I know that I am from my underground secret bunker in Washington D.C. at the moment. And I know I like to remind you of that because for some reason you live in Lincoln still.
I know. Yeah, we've got a long running joke about.
I know. I don't want happy listeners to turn it off after they hear my tweet about Lincoln. Anyway, lovely town, I guess, if you're from there. So back to Nebraska too. I think a couple of interesting things. Just I'll give away, like I'll put on my political consultant's hat. I've read, everywhere I read about the race, Crystal Rhodes says that she's running a grassroots campaign. I think you guys are going to see a great example of anytime you hear someone say that they're running a grassroots campaign, it means they don't know how to raise money, and they don't know how to manage people, and they don't know how to mount a real campaign. And you're going to see that in the results tonight, for sure. So I think the race is going to be between the other two. I have I guess a gut feel for who I think is going to win, but it is certainly not an educated guess. So at this point, we just wait for the polls to close and see what happens.
Yeah. Well, we're getting close to.
We do have live election results.
From Douglas County.
All right. Let's go to the news desk.
Very exciting.
Chase Porter, our news director, give us some numbers, brother.
Yes. Well, first of all, let's get these visible on the screen for everybody over here. But we are getting results right now. These are the first results for, okay, here we go. All right. So the race we were just discussing, the 1st congressional district, it looks like Chris Bachamire is in the lead by a healthy amount at the moment. Scrolling down here, the race we're all interested in, CD2, looks like John Kavanaugh is coming through in the lead right now with Denise Powell closely behind, Crystal Rhodes in 3rd, and Kishla Askins in 4th.
Remind us, Chase, what these numbers that we're looking at, these are the early voters, correct?
Correct. These should be all ballots that were returned prior to today. So these were all early vote ballots that we're looking at right now. We're going to see results from ballots cast today, I believe around 9 p.m.
What site are you guys looking at? Have you put your own tracker together here? Or I've always got the Secretary of State's up, the county election commissioners, and I'm always kind of toggling between all the tabs.
Right now, we're just looking at the raw data from the Secretary of State's office. Yes.
They've improved their website.
Yeah, it looks a little different.
Yeah.
Coming over to the statewide offices, we have the Republican primary right here with Pete Ricketts, yes, the U.S. Senator Republican primary with Pete Ricketts, of course, taking that one. Kind of an interesting race, Cindy Burbank against William Forbes. That's consumed a lot of media coverage lately, and Cindy is taking that one, it looks like. Coming down to the governor's race, of course, maybe not a surprise, Jim Pillen is leading. Then we got Lynn Walls down here also leading with a good showing. Also notably,
that Republican Secretary of State primary, because that seems like it's been a very interesting dynamic.
Well, is this interesting?
It's 50-50.
We have a 50-50 split with the incumbent Secretary Bob Evnen leading by just a matter of a couple hundred votes right now.
Interesting.
Wow.
I
Notably,
had a fellow Republican operative and former office holder described that primary to me as a knife fight in a phone booth, which I thought was a very, very descriptive kind of assessment from my arm's length. I'm not in the middle of that primary or close to either campaign, and I'm not a social media person, so I miss a lot of the chatter. But I knew enough to know that it was bruising, but I just didn't have a sense if it would be actually close.
Well, and that's interesting. So those are the early votes. I'm trying to analyze what that would mean in a Republican primary, but
I'd say let's wait for another couple of counts. But that is an interesting sort of early, sort of early result.
Yeah.
There's a real anti-incumbent mood in both parties, but I think it's even stronger in the Republican Party. And so a little bit of that, I think, is what Bob Evnen is probably struggling against, is that you've got the activist base of the Republican parties in a very, very anti-incumbent mood. And when you've been in office has he been in office 8 years and he's going for a third?
That sounds right. Yeah. That's
right about that?
right.
That's gonna be a drag on it. And I didn't see anything from his campaign that sort of burst through a little bit in terms of an advertising campaign or an image from him. He seemed to be very sort of defensive all the time, in this defensive crouch, which we see from a lot of these incumbents who are just kind of old time Republicans and just thought they could just do a decent job and get along, and then it turns out some nut job with taste for opportunity comes along and starts making shit up. That's kind of what
it's exactly right.
That's kind of what Scott Peterson has done.
Do you recall, Ryan, in your Republican days of a Republican primary for a constitutional office, either one of you, that was that? I'm trying to remember. It's typically not.
Well, I mean, we've always had the contested gubernatorial primaries, which usually sets the field, right, on the R side, sometimes for Senate and other things, too. Some of those were pretty heated, I remember, with significant high-profile candidates who were all going after a chunk of the vote with a lot of resources. So it seems like almost like a smaller version of some of those, right? Think back to the Ricketts, Bruning, Stenberg, right? Yeah, some of those really.
Well, I told people in the CD2.
Well, except that Scott Peterson raised no money and did no advertising, right? So he has no business winning. He has no business winning this race, right? But he might, like there was a lot of news in last week about the Indiana primaries, right, where the MAGA groups and Donald Trump took out after 7 state Senate incumbents who had opposed redistricting. We did 3 of those, and we won 2 out of the 3, right? So how do you do that? Well, you spend money and you have a good advertising campaign and you run a strong campaign and then you win, and that's how you do that. And so that's how you can prove to those voters that you're worth keeping, even though you've been there.
There's also a lot of energy around the big lie and election denial and election security. And I sat on the government committee for years, and you could see those factions in the Republican Party on display at the committee hearings, where there was literally filled rooms on those issues, and there was tension between kind of that kind of MAGA kind of freedom coalition type wing of the GOP and the institutionalists.
There was a group of Republican activists who a year or so ago, or maybe a couple years ago, who would show up at every Lancaster County election or Lancaster County board meeting and talk about these crazy ideas of election fraud that never happened, and
Yeah. But guys, you're talking about a committee hearing room with 25 people in it.
No.
We're talking about hundreds. We're talking about hundreds of thousands.
Actually.
Like, no, I get it. Like there is energy, but the way to win these things, if you're an incumbent, is you have to understand the difference between the online primary base and the not online primary base. And you've got to win the not online primary base resoundingly, and then you've got to fight for the online primary base. And that's the recipe. And if this thing ends up being close, it's going to be because Bob Evnen did a very, very inadequate job fighting, making a case to the non-online Republican base.
It had a heavy hand in a lot of those ballot initiative shenanigans. So that might be rubbing some voters the wrong way as well. I mean, many of his decisions in the last couple of years to throw candidates off the ballot that have been overturned in court, to deny the people the ability to vote on various ballot initiatives, overturned in court.
A good point too.
That might be a strain there as well. But I'll tell you, as I'm watching some of these others come in, and of course I've got my eye on the legislature because that's where my heart is.
Should we take a look at that?
It's exciting.
Yeah, let's
we can
take
pull
a look
that
at some
up.
of those.
Let's pull up
Chase.
some legislative races here.
Yeah.
All right.
We've got about 10 minutes before our next guest is in the house. Man,
And the
look at the
early-
crowd here. Look at this crowd. Give yourselves a hand.
Elected officials here
We
and
got former
candidates
mayors and former state senators
Yay.
and policy experts and
county treasurer,
yeah, look at this crowd.
A&D members,
Yeah.
community college board, and the early votes. I mean, I know that there's been release schedules put out by the SOS and some of the county election commissioners as well, but typically these are the folks that vote by mail, right? Those early ballots are the first ones that we're seeing that got returned probably through yesterday, if not before.
In Douglas County, that's certainly true. I think that in other counties they don't necessarily. There's no rule that requires that. I think that's just in Douglas County. That's historically
Kind of how they
the way
process it. Yeah.
Yeah, they've done, and then the 845. The 845 release will be the election day before noon.
Early
polling
voters.
place.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chase, what races are you looking at?
Yeah, let's see. Can we pull these up on the screen over here? So there we go. All of our viewers can see it.
Okay,
So
there's LD2. I've been spending a lot of time out there the last many weeks.
a close to home race, of course. Caitlin Knudsen is leading there. We have incumbent Brad Von Gillern trailing behind Cindy Maxwell Ostadek.
That's interesting.
You know, it is interesting, and I keep hearing rumblings around the Capitol, particularly from Republican operatives, that was going to be a much closer race than people might have thought, and that was really quite surprising to me for a variety of reasons. Senator Von Gillern is chair of a committee. It is.
Yeah.
It is well liked by his colleagues, thoughtful, very thoughtful person. And then you have a community really candidate stepping forward there who I think has just been, you know, really doing the retail work while Senator's in session. She's out knocking doors and talking about those unpopular votes on taxes and economic issues and the ballot issues. Got a lot of experience under her belt from the last go around. So just looking at the dynamics of the race, you would think kind of on paper that wouldn't be close, but I kept hearing it was going to be, and I was just kind of surprised to see how it would shake out. So that early return is interesting.
District 8.
Yes, another interesting race to succeed Megan Hunt. It looks like Aaron Feichinger, who was the endorsed candidate from the senator, is leading there.
Oh, that's right.
I went up and knocked for Erin a couple weeks ago. She's been a good friend for a long time in the policy arena, and I think the other Democratic progressive candidate in the race is a great guy, shares our values, smart lawyer. But I just really felt like Erin has the edge here on a personal level. And then because she's been so actively involved in the state legislative process, I really think that she can hit the ground running, knowing the rules and the issues and having relationships with returning senators.
Hey, Chase, isn't Terry Brewer, didn't we interview it? Didn't he run for mayor?
He ran for Omaha mayor.
Yeah.
That's right. In that crowded Omaha mayor primary.
Yeah, I remember talking to him.
That's right. Another incumbent race, we have Senator Merv Reapy leading in his race for District 12 at the moment. Maybe not a surprise.
Now, how are they
I think that's a bit
illustrating?
of a surprise.
Are they illustrating the write-ins with the Robin Richards dynamic in that race? I wasn't able to pick that up there. Or how will those just be processed or displayed? Does anyone know off the top of their head? That's something we should put an asterisk by and make sure.
So
to
there's a
follow
write-in candidate in that district?
There is. So
was it one of those?
it was not.
Okay.
A school board member, Robin Richards, who ran against Senator Reapy in the last go-around and came within a few hundred votes, was planning to launch a challenge this go-around, had some paperwork issues.
That's right.
And wasn't able to get on the
yeah.
ballot. So then she launched a write-in, which is actually more complex than just write me in. There's an educational process that has to go. You have to file the paperwork. You have to get them to check the name and fill it out. And so that's an interesting wrinkle in that race.
Ryan, did you have a thought on that race?
Yeah, I think, with the problem, the challenge that Merv was, I think he had a little bit more of a challenge than people thought, and that anti-incumbent mood, right? The MAGA base of the Republican Party was unhappy with him because he didn't vote for winner take all.
Yep.
If he ends up, I think he was in some danger here, not necessarily of making the runoff. But, it looks like if you're an incumbent and you're only at 40% in a in a top two advanced primary, that is a little troubling. It's a little troubling.
Yeah.
Well, I can tell you that we all really enjoy working with Senator Reapy. He's a senator that served, sat out, and then came back. And so he's one of the few, like myself, that has more than 2 or 4 years of experience under his belt. And so I also appreciate his thoughtfulness, and he's always got a read on his district. He knows that his district has elected him, but was pro Kamala Harris. And so he's always thoughtful about that blend, about those layers in his district. And I think that's why you've seen him exhibit more of a traditional kind of Nebraska state senator independence, and has been unafraid to push back against the governor, which has been really
I think you need to
interesting.
watch this. This is one you need to watch, though. Watch for the second
Top race.
count. Watch for the second count, because I agree with everything Danielle said. He's a very thoughtful senator. He's also the only Republican that can hold that seat, right? Because
That's probably right.
a right wing or Trumpy or whatever, however you want to describe it, Republican is really going to struggle, to carry Candlewood, right? In the modern political environment that we're in, and that's the neighborhood, that's the part of the city that he represents. Like Danielle said, Kamala Harris carried that district, and I think by a fairly healthy margin. But watch for the next count, because as you guys were talking about earlier, with the skepticism, Donald Trump always talking about how absentee ballots are fraud and everything. What we often see is you have a lot of the normie Republicans and Democrats and independents vote absentee. Or vote early because of convenience. They vote by mail. I vote by mail. And then you'll see within a Republican primary, you'll see a big difference between, you'll get a lot more Democrats and independents voting and so you'll in the early vote, so you'll see them counted first in the 8 o'clock count in Douglas County. And then the rest of the vote goes the other way, because all of the MAGA voters voted in person. So I think it'll be interesting to see what happens in that race with the 8:45 count.
Yeah, I think that's right, Ryan. And then sometimes that last batch, from the folks who come in after work, usually working folks, right? So sometimes you can see kind of a different swing back there, dependent upon voter habits during the day or how they cast their vote. And one thing that we were looking at pre-election day was just trying to keep tabs on those vote by mail numbers.
Yep.
Because historically, Democrats had really kind of run the table in terms of getting the word out, helping people get their ballots that way. You're starting to see a real rise, a significant rise amongst Republican voters who are enjoying that method of voting as well for a bunch of different reasons.
Yeah, that's right.
And then we've got 11 rural counties that are predominantly Republican that are all mail counties. So that kind of skews some of the numbers as well. But that's been kind of an interesting thing to watch. And I was so surprised reading some of the election coverage this morning and then watching those daily tallies come in. There were tens of thousands of mail-in ballots outstanding as of this morning in key counties and across the state. And so I'm sure there was a mad rush to get those turned in, or people doing ballot chase on the campaigns.
Ryan, I'm interested, you run campaigns and involved with media and campaigns all around the country. What do you see with the Republican Party? Do you see how are Republicans around the country reacting to the affordability issue, the war, some of these headwinds that the national party seems to be struggling with? How do you see that on the local level?
Yeah, I think those Republican voters, are struggling with it too. And that is a real ominous sign for the party's chances in the fall. We do a lot of work in Texas, for instance, and Texas is the first primary in the country. It's on March 3rd. And one of the challenges that we were running into there is we were having difficulty getting polling surveys completed, getting enough phone calls completed to build for the pollster to be able to build a statistically significant sample. And
Just
the
people
reason
were disinterested.
because Republican primary voters in larger than normal numbers were terminating the calls. They were not responding to the pollsters in the rates that they normally do. And when that polling team went back after the elections were over to investigate this, and went back and surveyed them again and checked to see how they voted, about 15% of them ended up voting of Republican primary voters ended up voting in the Democratic primary. And about half of the less likely, the Republican primary voters, what we call moderate or low propensity, but people who have voted in Republican primaries before, didn't vote, didn't turn out. So there is a measurable unease and disinterest within a portion of the Republican voting base that we're starting to see, and that is an ominous sign. And I think some of it is the war. I think a lot of it is cost and economy, primarily.
Ryan, let me ask you a question. This is something that I think has been really interesting this go around. I am the least tech savvy person in the world. I am old school. I can barely answer my cell phone. I still like a hard copy newspaper. But one thing that I've noticed, I keep hearing from voters as I'm knocking, they're like, what's the polling look like? Nebraska legislative races are notoriously difficult to poll because of the universe size, because of the cost.
Yeah, the
it's
cost
better
alone,
in devoted direct voter contact, a billion different reasons, right? So you never usually have great numbers. Maybe you can get a few crumbs from a phone survey or something like that. But one thing voters kept saying is, why aren't we seeing more polling in CD2? What's the horse race? Who's ahead? And, all of that was kept a lot closer to the vest this go around than you might normally see, or like independent polls from, say, like the World Herald that are usually a harbinger of kind of the temperature, what's going on out there, absent. So people are really scrambling for new sources of information. And I've started to track some of these prediction markets, which is something that
Did you put some money down, Senator?
I did not put any money down. I am just looking at these, and it was fascinating to see the fluctuations, and then to start to discern, like, there is some relevance and accuracy here, perhaps, but then, of course, it could be subject to manipulation, and there's some other issues that are out there. But that's a brand new factor that I just started looking at in just the last couple of weeks. And I'm still not sure what to make of it, but it's an interesting, I think, dynamic, and kind of goes to what Ryan was talking about how polling's changing. And kind of why and how and kind of what that next iteration might look like.
Yeah,
it's interesting. The Nebraska 2 race, the Kalshi Poly market today had John Kavanaugh slightly ahead, and then the first count got released, and he was up by a couple of hundred votes, and it swung to 85-25, which shows you. Or 85-15, which shows you these people don't know shit. Okay, they don't have any idea. Okay, because 150 or 200 votes difference in the first count doesn't mean anything at all. But I am, as a former economics major, I believe in the wisdom of crowds. Like there is something to that. To your point, it's a very savvy one, if not maybe a little too inside baseball for a lot of people. Legislative races are in Nebraska. The districts are too small.
Yeah, the universe.
Right? To be able to statistically, to get a statistical significance on the universe, right? A lot of people kind of know, well, you have to survey a couple hundred people, and then there's a, it's plus or minus 4.5% or something like that. Well, you need a bigger number that you're sampling, but you also need a bigger universe in order for there to be statistically significant. So you can poll a state, you can poll a congressional district. These state Senate districts in Nebraska are so small that the statistics break apart, number one. And number two, it's getting harder and harder to field polls because so many organizations are polling, because it gets more and more expensive because so many people are responding in different ways. So you have to You have to do telephone polling, cell phone polling. You have to do text to web polling. So it's more expensive to do it well. And so for a race like state senate in Nebraska, rarely does it make financial sense, and it's very hard to get a statistically accurate survey.
Yeah, yeah. Hey, I'm going to call an audible here because we're waiting on our next guest to arrive. So we're going to jimmy the system a little bit and see if former mayor of Norfolk, Nebraska, Mr. Josh Moenning, would like to come up and join us. Mr. Josh Moenning, welcome to the show.
Right. You say TGF for open primaries? Yeah.
I like it. Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. It's past
Good to be
time.
here.
You know, you were a fan favorite back in the day in Pints
been a
and
bit.
Politics. And is this your debut on this podcast?
In this new setting, yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
I feel
Welcome.
honored.
Yeah, well, we're honored. We're honored. And our other guests did arrive, so this is short. We'll get you back.
Oh,
No.
I'm gonna get bumped.
No.
I'm
You're
on
gonna
and
get
then I
bumped.
get bumped.
That's okay.
Yeah, that works.
That's all right.
You're flexible and nimble.
That's all
You're
right.
a repeat.
Yes, I'll be adaptive.
Well, so just what races are you watching? I know you're going to be back for a segment, and we're going to talk about some legislative races, but just your overall thoughts on election night in Nebraska.
Yeah. First, it's nice to be able to watch from the sidelines and not really care all that much. But
You
I really have a vested
care.
interest. I do care. I'm interested more in some narratives that I've been kind of observing in and around rural races, legislative races, and a shift, and I'll be real quick, that I think is somewhat unique to this cycle is there's less and less talk on social issues and more discussion on pocketbook issues and solving problems. And so I think that lends itself to candidates who are preaching a more pragmatic message. Like let's the status quo maybe not working all that well for us. Let's find a way to solve problems and get things done. And especially in rural places, rebuild main streets, bring new jobs to rural places, and keep young people around.
Yeah. Well, you did that in spades as mayor of Norfolk, and appreciate it very much. Okay, we're going to bump you, but you'll be back. Josh Moenning.
You nailed it. You nailed it. One take.
Thanks for filling time. Well, let me introduce the other CD1 candidate who's making his way over here. Chris, don't sit down. Well, you're going to sit down over here. Chris Bachamire, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to see you. Happy election day.
Thank you. This is exciting.
Yeah. Well, welcome, Chris. As I told your opponent, we've gotten to know each other the last few months. I deeply appreciate, first of all, your willingness to serve and run, and your willingness to talk to our audience on several occasions. So thank you.
By all means, it has been an honor to be on your show. It's been an honor to run in this race, and it's been tough, but it's great to be at this end of the first stage.
Yeah. And just as it worked out, we're waiting on. Anyway, we're running a little behind, but you'll tell me when our next guest is online. So anyway, Chris, how you feeling with the first numbers? And tell us your thoughts.
We are feeling really good. It's obviously still early. We're not going to count our chickens too early, but the first release that we saw seems very positive, and I think it's reflective of the campaign we've put together. And proud of my team, proud of everybody that's put in, the volunteers and everyone else who's been out knocking doors, leafleting, making phone calls, and we're excited.
Also, your first run for political office, right? And
Yes.
I asked Eric this. What was something that surprised you?
So I knew going into this job that it was going to be really difficult. But it still surprised me just how difficult it is. I've worked on some really tough problems over the years, but I've always been part of a big team, working in government on big national security challenges. You got a lot of resources to fall back on, a lot of different people. And this is really the first job where, a lot of it is on your shoulders and you're thinking about it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so that was something that really hit me hard. But at the same time, it's very liberating. You get to say what you want to say and you get to do what you want to do. And then you're measured at the end of the day as to whether it was good enough. So,
one of the things that I found fascinating about your career is your foreign policy experience. And you were right there at the table negotiating for the first Iran. Okay. And so we're gonna finish up here in a second. So anyway, just talk about that. Our next guest is waiting in the wings here. But Chris, just talk a little bit about that and the circumstances of now United States being thrust back into that arena and starting a new war in the Middle East. That had to be fascinating for you to watch. In a macabre way, maybe, but
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say, fascinating is the wrong word, very disappointing. But look, I got involved in Iran in a very disconnected kind of way. I started working on the Middle East after 9/11, working on counterterrorism, because that's what everybody did after 9/11, at least in the foreign policy space. That led me to working on the terrorism that Iran was conducting, and then later on its nuclear program. And I really learned on the job. I never had really a lot of experience in that. But I was lucky to be on the ground floor when President Obama decided he wanted to have an open hand, and negotiate with the Iranians in an effort to prevent them from having a nuclear weapon and prevent us from going to war over it. And we worked really hard over 2 years to try to put that deal together so that we could feel confident that, he and future presidents would have the ability to prevent that from happening. And unfortunately, I will say that, it was, my son's second birthday when we signed that deal. It was shortly after my daughter was born, a few years later when he pulled out of that deal. And now we see full circle what happens when you do that. And I've always said that I favor diplomacy not because it's weak, but because it was smart. And I think that's what we're not doing right now. We've got ourselves into a war where we have no real strategy and real theory on how we're going to get out of it. And it's costing, most importantly, Nebraskans, Americans, $25 billion at least, added to an already $38 trillion national debt. And that's the most criminal part about it.
yeah, it's crazy.
And we can actually bring it back home to Nebraska. We have another candidate on the call here. Candidate for governor, Lynn Walls, is on the line.
Let me say, Chris, thank you very much.
Hey, I think that they actually called the race for Chris.
Oh, they did?
He was being very humble.
Oh,
But
my
I think
goodness.
he may have
A few
indicated the
outlets have, but we're gonna, make sure that it's real. This is my
Every
first
vote
election.
counts.
I'm not gonna,
Yes.
I'm not gonna say
Congratulations,
anything till we get
Chris.
there. So, thank
Hard
you very
work.
much.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
All right.
All right.
Well, enjoy yourself.
Thank you very much. Hi, Lynn. Best of luck today.
Thank you.
Hello, Lynn.
Walls in the
Please welcome to
house.
the show former state senator and candidate for the Democratic nomination for governor of the great state of Nebraska, Lynn Walls. Lynn, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Dan. How are you?
We're good. We're good. We're so glad you could join us. And we've got Ryan Horn on from Washington. I think Ryan is still with us, Republican consultant. And of course, this young lady sitting next to me, Danielle Conrad is.
I certainly do.
Yeah, there's Ryan. So, how you feeling? What's the good word?
We feel pretty good. We had a good race and some good results came out, and now we are really excited to move on to the general.
Yeah, yeah. Danielle, you have been involved in politics in the state for a long, long time. What have you seen from Lynn's race that gives you encouragement, hope that the possibility of the first Democrat elected in statewide office in decades is possible? I want to hear from you, and then I want to hear from the candidate of why that's possible.
Well, I'll tell you, it is so exciting to see my friend, former Senator Lynn Walls, on the top of the ticket here in Nebraska. We had an opportunity to serve together, and that creates such a special bond amongst colleagues. And you form such incredible relationships with your colleagues all across the state, all across the political spectrum, that really endure. And I spent my whole day working the phones, talking to senators and colleagues who are so far to the right to me that there's not even a yardstick long enough. But I love them, and I appreciate their commitment to service. And serving with people like Lynn is just such a special endeavor because she works so hard. She's so much sunshine and light. She's such a problem solver, and she was just so well liked by her colleagues across the political spectrum, so much so that they elected her chair of the Education Committee during her tenure. And so I think it's really exciting for voters to have a candidate with a deep bench of experience, who has deep ties to urban and rural Nebraska, who has experience on issues that are close to our heart, like education. And one thing that I think has always been remarkable about Lynn is she's refused to be defined by the loudest voices on any side of the political spectrum. She's her own person, and she's a common sense person, and she brings that Nebraska nice, to reality. There is not anything inauthentic about Lynn Walls, and she loves everybody she meets, and she's hungry to learn everything she can every day when she gets up. And I think that enthusiasm has really sparked a lot of interest as I see her crisscrossing the state.
Yeah. Lynn, what's the experience been like running? This is not your first rodeo. You ran a statewide office as lieutenant governor a few years back, and so you've been across this state. You understand this state. But what did you learn from the voters and the constituents as you traveled the state this past many months?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that we walked away are visiting around, Nebraska, different communities and so many different constituents was that really we all have so much more in common than we do that divides us. Everybody, is concerned about fostering a more robust economy, attracting business, growing their communities, whether it's in rural or urban areas of the state. Everybody wants to make sure that we have a quality education for our kids so we can build our workforce. And that's from early childhood to post-secondary. Everybody is concerned about expanding healthcare across our state, especially in rural areas. So we just found that we have so many more things in common than we do that divides us. And I can tell you, Dan, that people across the state really want to unite again and work together again. They are so tired of neighbor being pitted against neighbor with some of the policies that we've had to deal with in the past. And they're just ready to move on, regardless of whether you're a Republican, Democrat, or independent. It is time to move on. And that's kind of what our campaign is all about.
I'll tell you what, and my friend Senator Lynn Walls is too nice to say it, but I'm going to just tell it like it is. I've been knocking a lot of doors and a lot of Republican doors over the past 8-10 weeks, and a lot more when I was out in my own district. And I will tell you, there is a significant dissatisfaction amongst Republican voters with Governor Pillen. They don't like the divisiveness, and he's failed to deliver on his signature issue of property taxes. And they are very upset about his treatment of their votes with the ballot initiative. So when you look at some of the national information out there that shows that Governor Pillen is one of the least popular incumbent governors in the country, I'm hearing that at Republican doors. And let me be clear, I appreciate working with Governor Pillen whenever I have an opportunity to do so, but I'm also not afraid to disagree and have that respectful disagreement when we need to. But there's a very, very interesting dynamic at place, and I think it's going to get people to take a second look at a candidate like Lynn Walls and really put aside some of that partisan kind of trapping or tribalism and say, you know what? We've had a record surplus blown into a deficit. We're sick of making headlines for all the wrong reasons. We've had complete Republican control in this country, in this state for a long time. Let's mix it up. Let's see if a former teacher and a mom can get in there and a serious state senator and get our fiscal house in order and start getting headlines out of Nebraska that make everybody feel good and want to stay here.
Before we kick you loose, Lynn, Ryan Horn, Republican consultant from Washington, D.C., is still with us, I believe. Ryan, you got a question for Senator Walls?
Yeah, I agree with what Danielle said. I think, I don't have to tell you, like, you're up against a big challenge in Nebraska because of the underlying partisan nature. I do a lot of work all over the country, and it's a little bit like when we go to help Republicans in New Jersey. We're just not a good cultural fit for that state.
Right.
The party is not a good cultural fit for that state. It's not. And the Democratic Party's brand is incredibly unpopular in Nebraska statewide. Yes, Governor Pillen, I think, is unpopular statewide. I agree with everything Danielle said. How are you going to go about overcoming that challenge and convincing and convincing voters that you're not of the party from, you know, the HR lady that ran for president saying we should, of course, taxpayers should pay for, you know, transition surgeries for prisoners, right? Like, how are you going to get past that Democratic Party brand and convince voters in Holdridge, you know, that you're concerned about ag prices and commodities and tariffs and get past that damaging cultural brand that the Democratic Party is?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting that you asked that. When I was elected to the legislature in 2016, it was a Trump plus 33 district that I won against an incumbent. And then I won again in 2020 with 19 points. And honestly, it is people just getting to know who I am and having conversations with people, being able to have, you know, talks around a table or town halls, whatever it is. But I think that the more that people get to know me, the more that they understand that I am honest. This campaign is not about me. It is honestly about the people who live in Nebraska. I'm not here to climb some political ladder. And I think that once I have conversations with people and they see that I really am here just to represent Nebraska, to grow our communities, to give our kids opportunities, that they trust me and I gain more votes. And we've seen that happen just over the last, you know, few months that we've been out in communities. We have seen more and more Republicans showing up at our town halls and more and more people coming to the town hall. So it's just going to be a continual, you know, out traveling the state, stopping at communities along the way and meeting as many people as we possibly can.
Yeah. Well, it's going to be a fascinating race to watch, Lynn. Congratulations on, I assume you've secured the nomination at this point. And so congratulations, and we'll be watching, and I hope you get some rest tomorrow. Do you get to take the day off?
No, we're going to head to Lexington tomorrow. So we're going to continue to go out and
That's the right answer.
Absolutely. We're going to be gone for a couple days. Lexington, Gothenburg, McCook. So we're going to hit the trail tomorrow.
Quick question though. So not everybody knows this about my friend Lynn Wall. She's also a runner.
Yeah.
So when you're out on the campaign trail, are you finding some cool trails as you travel across the state to get out there and get your miles in and stay strong and clear-headed?
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I want to start is Run with Lynn campaign. So I'm hoping that wherever I go and when I get out and run in the morning, that I may have a few friends join me so I'm not by myself.
I love it.
That's a smart idea.
That's cool. Well, let me know when you swing through North
Brad
Lincoln.
Ashford did that, Lynn. Yeah, Brad Ashford had a run with Brad.
He did. I remember.
When he got elected. But my first job in politics, I worked for Brad when he ran for Congress in 1994.
Cool.
And he had, and I was like, this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. But you know, over time, more and more people came. It became kind of a thing. I don't know if he continued it into when he was elected to Congress, you know, years later. But yeah.
We'll have to let him know that I'm not only going to be there for a town hall, but I will go out running with anybody who wants to in the morning. So
I definitely remember Brad taking a run every day over the noon hour when we served together in the legislature, and he'd run with all different kind of luminaries in Nebraska politics. So that's a really cool memory and a great way to bond together. So, all right, Lynn, let me know when you're ready to take a lap around East Campus, beautiful East Campus. I'll meet you up there.
I would love to. I miss you.
Good luck, Lynn.
Thank you,
Thank
Lynn.
you.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, we had a congressman drop off. So anyway, we were going to have Congressman Mike Flood on, but apparently he had some scheduling troubles and not able to join us. So we're gonna do this. We're going to jump to our next segment we're going to give you a break.
Okay.
Are you
kicking me
done?
out,
Are
Dan?
you done for the night?
Am I done for the night? I think I've already overstayed my welcome.
No. You have not.
I think, did the AP call the race for Danielle, by the way, in her district?
Razor thin. Razor thin.
Razor thin, but
It's so exciting. That is a new experience to be unopposed. I will take it. But you know what? I went out and knocked my whole district September through December before we got into session, and it was great to stay grounded to the community and hear what's on people's minds. And I'm really honored to have a chance to go back to the legislature and continue my work. So next year, we'll just wrapped up my 12th year in the legislature. I'm the senior member of the legislature, and then we'll have a whole crop of new faces, it looks like, to come down and join us. So that's going to be real exciting.
well, speaking of legislative races, first of all, Danielle, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. Always good to see you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Chase. Thank you, all of our beautiful friends in the audience here in spirit and online and at home. And happy Election Day to everybody. I mean, this is just going to be, I think, a really exciting marker in what's going to continue to be a thrilling election year. Everybody who cares about our democracy knows that this is going to be our greatest opportunity to build a real firewall for working families, for civil rights, for restoring norms in our democracy. And we've got to do it in the Congress and at the state level. And I'm really, really excited because I think that we have a chance to do that. And I think it's going to be a confluence of people who come together through their patriotism and pragmatism to really settle on candidates who are offering real solutions and a different approach. And I think it's going to be really exciting, really exciting.
Well, I appreciate your leadership and your vitality, and you always have a seat at this table anytime you want.
Thank you. Thank
All
you.
right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Okay, well, if you want to talk about some legislative races, come on up, guys. We can talk about a lot of races, but come on up, guys. We're going to bring back Josh Moenning, former mayor of Norfolk, Nebraska, and Brandon Beyer with One House, a strategic communications and political firm that takes care of clients all over the state of Nebraska. Brandon, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So I wanted to talk about some legislative races, and News Director News Director Chase, are there some legislative races that we want to zero in on?
We're still hitting around the same vote percentage, but we have it pulled up right here on the screen. We already looked at District 2 earlier and District 4. One race that I did find interesting that might warrant some conversation down here, featuring an incumbent senator, Lauren Lippincott. He's facing perhaps a more challenging race than he might have anticipated out there in District 34.
Interesting. Any races, Brandon, that you've been following in the legislature?
I mean, I've been following a lot of them. I have not been following District 34 super closely, but just looking at those numbers, I think you'll see Lauren Lippincott's vote margin probably continue to grow throughout the night. His margin already grew from the last round that I looked at. But it's early in the night and a lot of things can happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Josh, I know you've been across the state and talking to candidates. What is it that in these legislative races, I mean, somebody mentioned it earlier, there's 40,000 roughly people in a district, and they become, pretty interesting when it comes down to that many candidates and dividing up the vote.
Yeah, and you see some of these races where the race is pretty crowded. We just went by LD 38 where there's 5 candidates in that race, and I think that's the most this cycle.
Wow.
But I mean, it speaks to the interest right now amongst a lot of people to engage in the process, or not. And I spoke earlier about narratives in some of these races, and I'm seeing in the rural races that I'm watching that there are people who are sincerely interested in solving problems and being pragmatic about issues and not as ideological as maybe we've seen in previous cycles. So I think that's generally a good thing for the state as a whole.
Yeah, yeah.
Someone in the chat is asking us to look at District 36 right now, which is a bit close. We have two candidates right there, Darren Tompkins and Rick Holdcroft. Another incumbent, Rick Holdcroft.
An incumbent who's behind in that race. Remind me where that district's at. Does anybody know?
Yeah, it includes Gretna, and it includes a kind of a fishhook all the way down to parts of Bellevue, and it actually includes a few precincts in Douglas County as well. What you'll see throughout the night in at least Douglas, Sarpy, Lancaster is you'll see Democrats or left-leaning candidates start with a higher lead, and you'll see that lead diminish throughout the night.
Because of the early voting.
Because of the early votes. And so, this is, Darren Tompkins is a client of mine. And so I think he's in a strong position. I think it's going to be roughly 50-50. Could be 52-48, either direction at the end of the night. But you will see that lead for Tompkins probably diminish a little bit throughout the night as more votes are counted.
What are you looking for in a primary when it's just one-on-one like that? What do you want to accomplish? Is it really important to win that primary or to come close? What's the strategy typically?
It's really important to at least come close. You obviously want to win. That helps build momentum. That helps believe. But when you start thinking about all of the different factors of how you're raising money, how you're engaging with voters, having some level of momentum or at least a narrative that you can come back and win is extremely important. So I know a lot of people are like, well, both are going to advance, but you really need a strong showing in this primary to have a chance to build the momentum you need going into November.
Yeah.
Another
Which goes to
chatter.
the question, I think, should they even be on the ballot if there's just two candidates in top two open primary where they're going to advance anyway? I don't know. There's arguments to be made either way. I think.
Question. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I'd say Nebraska has a little bit of a unique system. It's when you have a top two advance in these primaries. I've had clients in these primaries like this too. It's very difficult to say from a race where these two are going to advance anyway, whether this means anything for the fall if it's relatively close, right? Because the turnout in the fall is going to be 3 times what it is here in the primary. It's just going to be a completely different universe of voters. So, and then as a strategist, you have a tough decision to make about, well, to Josh's point, like you're going to get through anyway, particularly if you're a challenger and you might be a little shorter on resources. How much do I spend right now, or do I save it all for the fall? And the decision there usually is to save most of it for the fall. So it's a little difficult to read too much into it. I would say that, and their point is well taken. Yeah, they will get the vote. Cali will move back towards Republicans a little more as the night goes on, and races that involve Douglas and Sarpy County. That's definitely going to happen, no question. But I am seeing like some of these Republican incumbents. This trend of Republican incumbents being unpopular within the Republican Party, I think, is showing itself a little bit here.
I think that's right. I think that's
at least in the early count tonight. Let's see what happens when the next round of counts comes in from Douglas and Sarpy.
And we do have an example of what Ryan is describing, and the chat is asking us to take another look at District 4 with Cindy Maxwell versus incumbent Brad Von Gillern.
Wow.
If I'm remembering correctly, those numbers, by percentage at least, actually held pretty good. So I think that's an encouraging sign for Democrats if you're rooting for Democrats in this election, or in Cindy's case, a left-leaning independent.
Do you know what the issues have been in that race, Brandon?
I think you're seeing in a lot of races right now, especially in incumbent races, is the will of the people, listening to voters.
Yeah.
And with these ballot initiatives,
Yep.
I think that's been a major thing. And then cost of living, property taxes, those are things that you're just seeing pop statewide. And I think you're going to continue to see that into November as well.
Go ahead, Ryan. Did you have something?
No, I'd say, I think part of what some Republicans are missing right now is that they're getting really, really caught up in what the White House says and what Donald Trump says and what some of the typical social issues are. Your superpower in this election is to go out and say things are too goddamn expensive. I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get them down. If that means get rid of tariffs, get rid of tariffs. If that means, right, that's your superpower. And in those 2 Indiana races where we pulled those people through, despite Donald Trump's best efforts, that's what we did. We focused on the issues that people care about. I'm here. I'm fighting for you. I'm fighting for this town. I'm fighting to make your life easier to live, right? And I think part of what Republican voters are kind of upset with incumbents about is that they're not hearing much of that.
I think that's right. I think there is another narrative theme out there that people feel like their elected officials, their politicians are not listening to them. I want to underscore that point on the will of voters in Nebraska, because I think that's something we're hearing even in rural districts, that people are saying, hey, okay, I may not have totally agreed with all of these initiatives, but a majority of Nebraskans approved of them. And now you have people in Lincoln saying, oh no, wait, we know better than what you meant to say on the ballot. And that's pissing some people off. It's frustrating people.
It's an extraordinary thing, Josh. You and I have been around this crazy business of politics a long time. You and I met, I think, 25 years ago, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, this is an extraordinary thing to see a legislature and an administration and an attorney general just say no.
Yeah.
This issue won 70% of the vote from the voters that elect us, but
just thumb their nose at the people.
Really, it is extraordinary.
And some of those issues I can maybe understand a little bit more, but the medical marijuana one, I just think stumps everyone. I just don't understand when you have an issue that is that popular. 71% of Nebraskans voted for medical marijuana, and you don't have just pockets of resistance. As you said, you've got the governor and the attorney general, just a full court press to deny 71% of voters. Anyway, that has confounded me from both a political strategy perspective and just a common sense perspective. So,
extraordinary.
Yeah.
It's astounding.
Yeah, it is. We've got about 2 minutes before we get some new numbers, right, Mr. Chase? So I wanted to, before we do that, just ask, is there any other legislative races before we start looking at the bigger numbers again that you want to focus on?
I think the power of the legislature, the makeup of the body, is truly going to come down to a lot of Omaha-based races. Sarpy County included. 12, 14, and 18 are probably some of the most interesting races to watch tonight, where you have multiple candidates or people being eliminated. In the District 12 race, there was money spent on 2 candidates on the Democratic side, one a write-in campaign, and yet at least the last result, the candidate that wasn't getting the most investment is in second place. So I think that one is worth definitely watching tonight, as well as all the shenanigans in 14 and 18 where you had...
Well, talk about shenanigans. We like shenanigans, Brandon.
You had Republicans calling the Democratic candidates in 14 and 18 MAGA Republicans. You had PACs playing, trying to knock out more moderate Republicans. There was a lot going on in those races, and it's going to be really, really interesting to watch what the final results are.
Yeah. Okay, we're ready to maybe look at some new numbers.
We're still waiting for numbers to drop at 9 o'clock. We're still sitting at 12%, but we can take a look here at District 14 and the numbers that were just being described.
Yeah.
We have Suzanne Witt in the lead.
Are you knowledgeable about that race, either one of you? I know, again, those are early numbers.
You have 2 Republicans there. I don't know much about this race, but you have 2 Republicans basically dividing the Republican vote there.
Yeah.
And the Democrat taking advantage of it, it looks like.
And remind me whose seat that is?
This is Speaker Arch's seat.
Oh, right.
So Bill Bowes is a firefighter. He's the fire chief, I think, in Papillion. Jay Jackson actually got the firefighter union endorsement in the race.
Interesting.
And the two Republicans spent a lot of money beating each other up and, trying to paint Witt as a candidate that she's not.
Okay. All right. These new numbers, Chase?
We are still waiting on new numbers.
Okay.
And I would know, it's interesting to me to watch a few rural races where it's Republicans running against Republicans. I'll go back to the 38 race, which is crowded. That's Senator Merman's seat. He's term limited. And you arguably have each of these, there's 4 Republicans and 1 Democrat. Melanie Knight's the Democrat. But if 4 Republicans, Janelle Anderson-Erkey is really focused. She founded Grow Nebraska, a small business entrepreneurship firm. Really has run a race based on rural economic growth. Again, pocketbook issues. How do we create a better job environment, economic opportunity environment in rural places? From what we're seeing now, I guess I'm hopeful that narrative is resonating with people, and I think it kind of speaks to. There's a lot of recognition around the state that the status quo is not necessarily working for everyone, and that lends to some polling that we've seen recently that shows a majority of Nebraskans, even Republicans, say the state is on the wrong track. That's also astounding to me. When you have Republicans saying that, who have elected the current leadership, saying, we're not going in the right direction. Interesting.
Do you sense that, Ryan, in your travels?
Yeah, I think we're seeing. I think we're seeing a lot of that. Some of it has to do, as Josh sort of alluded to, it's sort of surprising when you see it in Republican areas or in any party's area where they control all the levers of power. Usually, in New Jersey, Democrats think things are going great in New Jersey, and in Nebraska, Republicans think things are going great in Nebraska. But you're starting to see that flip all over on both sides. I think we're seeing anti-incumbent energy here because incumbents are not answering the call of the issues of the day. They're not focused on the economy. They're not focused and much is made, I think, and then when I talk with national media, they call me to ask me about what's going on in Nebraska. Much is made of the U.S. economy, which is really in pretty good shape right now, but with some problems with inflation and prices. But rural economies are really struggling right now. And so I think we're going to see this really in a really strong way in Nebraska, where voters are going to respond to leaders who go out and say, I'm going to try to make this situation better. I'm going to try to make it so young farmers can get their foot in the door and not go under and keep their young farm afloat, right? I'm going to try to do something about commodity prices. I'm going to try to do something about fertilizer prices, like the cost, right? And just really, like Josh said, make this about making life easier to live and get by. They're going to reward those, and I think we're seeing too many incumbents that are just not focused on that, and they're getting hit a little bit.
Yeah.
Just to note, we are on standby for Brinker Harding's campaign event tonight. He is about to speak, so we're waiting for him to go live there.
Yes, and one of our other guests is also waiting on that, so that's why we don't have him
That's right.
yet. So
that's right.
Anyway. Should we look at those numbers in the Democrat primary, just to remind ourselves where that's at?
We can do that. We also haven't talked about the Board of Regents tonight.
Oh, yeah.
If you're curious to look at that.
Yes, let's look at the Board of Regents.
All right.
A couple of races that we've been following. There's a race that we've had both of those. I didn't realize there was a third candidate in that race, okay? But we've had both Jeremy and Brent on the show. That's an interesting. So again, these are just the early numbers, right?
Correct.
So either of you followed that race at all?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, some of these races, they get so large compared to the dollar amounts that they spend that there's only so much that you can do. I think at the end of the day, what you're going to see and what you are seeing in those results is it is a very left-leaning district for, I think it's District 1 I was looking at and starting to comment with Comstock and hosting. I think the district completely overlaps with the State Board of Education race. Kristen Christensen ran
right.
for that district last
That's
cycle. She won by, I want to say, 15 points. I think you're kind of seeing the same thing shake out here.
Yeah.
I'll say, knowing Jeremy, knowing both the candidates, Jeremy and Brent, but going back, having been a staffer back in the day with Jeremy in Republican politics, a good candidate, all things considered. But Brandon's right. This district is really a tough one for a Republican to win. Tim Clare handled it pretty. I don't know that it was drawn up the same way it is now when he originally won it, but was, I think, deemed probably a pretty moderate Republican. The districts change and become more left, and so it's a very challenging one for a Republican now to win.
I'd be interested in Ryan's take on the Omaha Regents race with Suzanne Shore and company. Have you followed that race at all, Ryan? We had Suzanne on the show. I've not had any of those other candidates running against her. But fascinating, as most people know, Suzanne Shore, wife of Pete Ricketts.
I don't think most people know that, actually, Dan. I think most political insiders know that,
Yes.
but I don't think folks actually know that. And so that makes it kind of an interesting race. I go with Brandon's point. These regent races have a lot of voters in them. They're big districts relative to they're the size of a congressional district almost. And the budgets are pretty small. So they're hard races to follow. Suzanne Shore is a Democrat, notoriously, a liberal Democrat, while her husband was a conservative Republican governor of the state and now Senate. I don't think we would care about this race really otherwise, would we?
Probably not, right?
Oh, no, I don't. A Democrat's going to win the Board of Regents seat from the Omaha area.
Dog bites man. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think the Hoseen race could be a somewhat interesting one in the fall. And then he's a Republican and he's in the wrong party to be running in that district. But he has an interesting story. He's a neurosurgeon, self-made guy. Like he has a really interesting University of Nebraska Medical Center graduate. He's a neurosurgeon, I think, at maybe St. Elizabeth's and Lincoln. Am I getting that right? So he has a great story, but does he have the team and the financing and the work ethic to put it together and get that message out and score an upset? Because if you could get the two profiles together in front of the voters, that's the guy you want to be the regent, is the neurosurgeon, self-made guy, up from his bootstraps, put himself through medical school. That's the guy you want. But I don't know if he's going to be able to do that. Yeah. It's a very Democratic district, to Brandon's point.
Yeah.
Let's go to another very interesting race at the moment. We have the Secretary of State race with incumbent Bob Evnen and challenger.
Are those new numbers?
These numbers are up to date as far as the Secretary of State's website goes. I think we're still waiting on votes to drop, but Scott Peterson has pulled ahead of the incumbent, Bob Evnen, on his own website.
Wow. Fascinating. I don't even know what to say.
Talked about the anti-incumbent thing, right? Yeah.
This is anti-incumbent mood here, coming through, I think. So I think we're gonna continue to see it in places, and this is there. And Danielle made a good point. It was along the lines of what Josh was saying. Like, has he rubbed enough normie Republicans the wrong way over his role in kicking people off the ballot and the sort of perceived shenanigans? Did that rub enough normie Republicans the wrong way that they were unwilling to come to his rescue and vote for him against a MAGA guy. That might be a little bit of what's going on, but yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question, Ryan. I think there's some to that. Or is it just the prevailing narrative amongst MAGA Republican primary voters that there's election corruption and our current Secretary of State's not doing enough to remedy it? I think there's both things are elements here.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Should we take another peek at CD2?
Yeah.
The hottest race of the night?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, as I say that, Brinker Harding is going live, or he is about to.
Can we take it?
We are going to try.
Yeah.
And this is the focus of the GOP party tonight, as this is
Coverage from WOWT.
Thank you.
Now let's listen in there, as you see on the gentleman's phone there, that Harding has taken the stage, and we will be hearing from him in just a moment.
And tonight, I stand before you surrounded by friends, by supporters, incredible elected officials, and most importantly, my family. Together, because this always has been and will always be a team effort, I humbly accept the Republican nomination to the United States Congress for Nebraska's 2nd District. While this campaign started, and you saw some of the notes of the number of days, but this campaign officially started 315 days ago. But it started decades before that. I'm so proud to be born in Omaha, Nebraska. It's the greatest city in America to live and raise your family. And here we talk about the American dream. We talk about it a lot in politics and our daily lives. But what does it mean? For me, it's deeply personal. It's the idea in America that if you work hard, you treat people right, and you play by the rules, you can not only achieve whatever you set out to do, but you can leave it for your children and grandchildren to build upon. This American dream started 250 years ago in the city of Philadelphia. It was started by brave young patriots who risked their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honors to establish a country where we could live to be free. And I stand here today as a product of an American dream born and realized here in Omaha. And on behalf of the family present here and gone before us, I am so humbled by the opportunity to represent this district in the House of Congress. But before I get started to talk about what's at stake in November, I do need to thank a few of the people here tonight. And first of all, my wife, Rebecca, my daughters, Grace and Elizabeth, and my team. It's really important to have the right team. And Flyover Strategies with Matthew and Derek, and Tommy and Nick and Zach and Bryce, and our fundraisers at J Best, which include Jen and Jessica, Akimi, Sandra, and the boys, and our DC team, which includes John, Casey, Jeff, and J-Bo. You'll meet J-Bo at some point. But more importantly are the donors, the volunteers, and the endorsers who believe in this campaign, who believe in me, and made it possible from the very beginning. And as a side note, there is no rest for the weary. We'll be counting on you again because the next leg of the relay, we already have a parade this Saturday, so I'm going to need some signups for people to march in the parade on Saturday. But today is an important day, and this November's elections are crucial. Every day Our conservative movement is defending radical left craziness and restoring normalcy.
Thank you.
We have so much momentum, but together we have so much more that we can accomplish. And that's what this November's elections are about. It's not about Republican or Democrat. It's not about liberalism or conservatism. It's not about MAGA or TDS. This November's elections are about normal versus crazy.
Okay.
And it's about common sense versus insanity. And here's what I mean. This year, America turns 250 years old. And as I said earlier, our brave founders risked everything to establish the freest, most prosperous, and greatest country known to mankind. But this idea, it centers on a government that delivers for the people and is accountable to the people. Today, it seems that too many in Congress forget what it's all about. Instead of pledging their lives, they stay there for life. Instead of pledging their fortunes, they make a fortune. And instead of carrying themselves with sacred honor, too many govern without integrity. And this is why I am running, to restore our founders' vision from 250 years ago. Let's be honest, if Congress was a career move for me, I'm late to the game.
Are we done with Brinker?
This November,
Whatever you want to.
we have a choice. Do we want America's next 250 years to be more like the failed radical left policies of Zoran Mondani? Or, no, absolutely not. Or Gavin Newsom's California? Or do we want America to be more like the good life here in Nebraska? You guys are picking up the cue. This is the audience participation part, so you're doing great. Okay, so stay with me. Do we want our next 250 years to be about crippling inflation? No! Open borders and uncontrolled immigration? No! Socialist handouts? No! Boys and girls bathrooms? No! Transgender surgery for minors? No! This is my favorite. Believing that men can get pregnant. We can't have $40 trillion deficits. We need to defend our police. We can't be sympathizing with the Iranian regime that chants death to America, and then they fund terror to prove it. We can't have an education system that leaves too many kids behind. Rampant crime, addiction, and homelessness. Weakness on the world stage. And allowing the American dream to die? No. Or do we want our next 250 years to be about unleashing the American economy? Shrinking the size of government and balancing our federal budget. Cutting taxes and lowering interest rates.
Yeah, okay. Well, there's a good taste of Brinker Harding's speech, his victory speech, winning the Republican nomination. And of course, as I think most of our audience knows, it was a two-person race. Former State Senator Brent Lindstrom was in that race and got out. And not only got out, but he switched parties, became an independent. And so anyway, Brinker had a smooth sailing to that nomination, and now will face the Democrat winner of that hard-fought CD2. Interesting. Thoughts on his comments, guys? Seems like a playbook that's a very current party, MAGA-centric. I didn't hear a lot of words that Let's put it this way. I didn't hear Don Bacon's voice in that concession or that victory speech.
Same old thing. And in that district, in this cycle, it's not going to be enough to win for a Republican. He's going to have to get more creative, my opinion.
I thought it was interesting that he's talking about inflation when gas prices are rising as quickly as they are. And that's largely due to the war in Iran, and that's the Trump administration doing that. So it's a top issue for voters. I'm just not sure that that's going to land for him.
Yeah. We do have some audience members. If audience members have questions for us, hop on up to this mic and ask us a question. I see a couple friends in the audience that you're welcome to ask a question, but and we're going to have Aaron Sanderford on here in a minute. Aaron Sanderford, editor-in-chief of Nebraska Examiner, Nebraska nonprofit newsroom. Aaron was covering that speech today. I just think, and Congressman Bacon has been kind enough to be probably my most frequent guest in the past year and a half on this show. And by the way, Brinker, Mr. Harding, we've been chasing him for several months now to come on the show. And I understand, I don't think he did a lot of media during the primary, and so hopefully we'll get him on to talk. But anyway, it's going to be a hard-fought race. There's going to be a lot of money spent in that race. It's inevitably it's going to be one of the races to watch in the United States. That CD2.
And not a word there about foreign policy, which I understand why, because it's not the Republican Party policy on that right now is not proving to be beneficial or fruitful, but it is affecting a lot of things here in Nebraska.
I'm interested.
Gas prices, tariffs, fertilizer prices, all of those things. Probably something we should be talking about, but very convenient for Republican candidates not to be talking about right now.
Yeah. I'm interested because both of you have your ear to the ground. What is that very competitive shit ton of money is going to be spent on that race? What does that do for the down ballot in those districts for either legislative seats or whatever? What are your thoughts, Brandon?
I think it really depends on what sort of investments are made. HMP has already announced a $3 million ad buy, if I'm remembering correctly. I don't think that has a huge impact overall. I think if you start seeing more investments in door knocking, phone calls, and real turnout operations, it's going to have more of an impact on down ballot races. But ultimately, the top of the ticket does shape the narrative. If Democrats are excited about their candidate and they feel like their candidate has a good chance of winning, that helps with Democratic turnout. The same thing is true for Republican candidates.
So Chase, what do we have for new numbers?
These are not exactly brand new. We're still sitting at 13% votes in right now, with 6% of precincts reporting. Was there a particular race you gentlemen would like to look at?
Well, I just wanted to get back to the CD2
let's take a look at it.
Race.
We have it right here. These are the updated numbers by the Secretary of State's office, with John Kavanaugh by a narrow lead.
Yeah, still very close. I'm a little surprised at the distance between Kishla and Crystal. As I think most of our audience knows, we've talked to all of those candidates several times, got to know them really well. And I'm a little surprised that, of course, again, these are early numbers. Well, I guess they aren't. 319 out of 334. Is that?
Partially reported.
Partially,
there.
yeah.
Yes.
Looks like it could be very close, though, at the end of the night.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised by the Crystal Kishla margin. And I say that because Crystal has been elected in Douglas County multiple times.
That's right. Yes.
And
absolutely.
so she comes in with a base, she comes in with some name recognition that Kishla did not have. Kishla really didn't spend a whole lot in the election, and she really spent most of her money in the last week to 10 days.
Yep.
And it was a little bit too late by that point after all the spending on behalf of Kavanaugh and Powell.
Yep. Interesting. Well, the race it's going to be fascinating. There's going to be a ton of money spent in that race. And again, I just, having gotten to know the incumbent and his tightrope walk these past few years to hold on to that seat, he was able to thread that needle. And anyway, it's going to be fascinating to watch.
And I think he created somewhat of a prototype for Republicans to follow in districts like that are competitive. He didn't always follow the party line, was willing to be independent, had a very good sense, I think, of where his district was. When it comes down to it, I think Congressman Bacon's career will be well looked upon.
Yeah.
As far as his service to this.
What do you think? And I've had this conversation with Congressman Bacon of what I don't think he's done. I don't know if he's maybe going to run for another elected office. I think he wants a position in the next administration. I think he's looking at the Chuck Hagel model, that he could serve a Republican or a Democratic president in a capacity, Secretary of Defense would be my guess.
He's still relatively young,
Yeah.
and I think feels comfortable within executive branch setting. So I know there was talk of him potentially running for governor when that seat was open 4 years ago. So I think we'll probably see more of him in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
All right. It looks like we do have Aaron Sandiford on the line. We're maybe waiting to page him into the broadcast here. I'll just take a moment as the producer of the show to plug our Patreon.
Thank you.
Of course, any support that the show receives is always appreciated, as well as anybody viewing. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel so we can keep this going. We've been talking in depth about doing this again for the general election, so we would like to keep that rolling.
Yeah, and I'll just, as we wait to bring Aaron on, I'll just remind our audience of how appreciative I am of the whole team here today. Ike Simonis, our on-site producer, Mr. Chase Porter, our news director, Darren Litchie is our on-site technical lead, Vince Rule has done the live stream production, and Chris Steffen live stream production. There he is, the editor-in-chief of Nebraska Examiner, Mr. Aaron Sandiford. Aaron, thanks for joining us, my friend.
Thanks, Dan. Sorry about that. I was not expecting Brinker to go on quite that late. I thought maybe you'd do it at 8:30, but 9:04 kind of hit us both.
Hey, that's okay. We've had a great discussion of the race. We got to cover, we got to see Brinker's victory speech. And we're just, I don't know if you know who's with us, former mayor of Norfolk, Nebraska, Josh Moenning, and Brandon Beyer from One House is with us. So
very good.
Good to see you.
Your thoughts on Brinker? We were just discussing Brinker's speech, and my comment, I won't assign it to my guest, but it was not a Don Bacon speech.
No, it's very clear from both Dave Heineman, the former governor's speech, and Brinker's speech that they have decided the path to winning in CD2 this time is motivating the Republican base, and they're talking like it.
Yeah. I mean, we were talking about how Congressman Bacon was able to thread that needle for race after race and build a coalition of moderates and, moderate Democrats, moderate Republicans, and independents. And I didn't necessarily hear that in Brinker's speech.
Yeah, it's very strange to me to see him talk about trans rights and to talk about, women and men's sports. He has been a fairly moderate city councilman, so it's a little bit different than what I expected from him.
Yeah. you've maybe been following the Democratic race closer than we have this evening. We've been looking at the numbers. Your thoughts on where that lands and how much longer we're going to have to wait?
Yeah, I'm not really sure at this point what I'm seeing. I mean, what are you seeing in that? I mean, for me, I think Powell is still gaining. I mean, when I looked, she gained in Douglas County by what, about nearly 300 votes? Was it about? Between the 8 and 8:45. And I mean, I think Kavanaugh probably ekes it out, but we may be here a bit.
Okay. What do you make of that race? I know you guys have been doing a great job. By the way, I just want to take this opportunity publicly to thank you for the work that you do with your team, with Nebraska Examiner. You guys are cranking it out, and it's noticed and appreciated. So anyway, you guys have been on that race, and it's been a fascinating knockdown, drag out, and I want to get you guys' comments too, but it's been an interesting race. We haven't seen, I've been telling some of my Republican friends or my Democratic friends saying, oh my gosh, we just aren't used to this. It's like, hey, us Republicans, we're used to a knockdown, drag out primary race here in the state. So it's been an interesting race.
Yeah, open seat races like this are rare on the Democratic side. They often bring out a crowd, but I don't think a lot of us expected the way it turned out. I mean, Crystal Rhodes is pretty well. I mean, I'll be the first to say I assumed she would be a lot higher than what she is right now, mainly because of her ground game. She's one of the best political consultants in the city.
Yep.
And I thought knocking on doors would be enough, but it just looks like she got swamped by the money and the effort from the Powell campaign.
Yeah, and we had this conversation privately earlier this week about Crystal, and you know, she was I think she was one of the first candidates. I talked to all of those candidates, and she was the one that started the narrative about not electing John Kavanaugh because of this, because of losing his seat in the legislature. And of course, then Denise campaign picked up on that and spent a shit ton of money along with other PACs on that theme.
Yeah, living in the Omaha area and in CD2, it burned my eyeballs. I mean, you couldn't turn anywhere without hearing or seeing that ad. My children who live on YouTube could not survive without seeing that ad every 3.5 loops. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Dan, it's interesting to me to what extent is the calculus for Democratic voters in CD2 winnability? Ultimately, who can win that seat? I have to think that plays into Kavanaugh's favor, just name recognition, family history, his service in the legislature. I wonder how much that has an impact in a primary like this.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I mean, to me, it looks a lot like the Cara Eastman and Ashford race, where you had the old line Democrats, the Catholic Democrats in Omaha aligning one way, and you had the kind of new line progressives aligning another way. But this race splits it a whole new way, and I really can't. I'll be really interested to look at the numbers and see how this splits out. But electability is clearly a concern for some of the Democrats, and it just kind of splits. Powell has the money, Kavanaugh has the name, and it's just kind of an interesting run.
Yeah. Aaron, have you been able to follow the Secretary of State primary and the Republican primary? That thing is pretty fascinating.
Yeah, it is. It is one of those races that I think if it stays where it is, I don't know that Evnen is going to have a very good night, because the 3rd district, the rural counties come in late, and they're not a place where he's likely to do very well. I think this looks pretty bad for the Secretary of State right now, and I'm not sure. I mean, it depends on what's out, and it depends on how motivated urban and suburban and ex-urban Republicans were to vote. But I mean, you've been around Republican politics a long time, Dan. Do you see a path if you go down at this point in the night and you're not leading in the 3rd, how to win?
I think you're accurate. I mean, that's where traditionally the more conservative MAGA voters, if you will, are going to fill in, is that 3rd district. And if Mr. Evenen is behind without those votes, then yeah, it could be a long night. That would be so fascinating. Here's an election denier.
Well, and that's a person. I mean, Josh knows this. I mean, your other guest too. I mean, like this is someone who will sit on the state elections board that has to certify elections. I mean, there's only 3 votes, right? It's the attorney general, the governor, and the secretary of state.
It's not like it's not a playing around position, right? Like it's serious business. And yeah, we talked about this race a little bit before and how it falls into this anti-incumbent narrative that's out there. Still, we're seeing across the board, but particularly in Republican primaries where you have, Secretary Evenen is probably viewed as more of a traditional style Republican. And the fascinating thing is, I don't know that his challenger, in this case Peterson, really was able to devote a lot of resources to campaigning. I mean, there wasn't a lot of spending on that side. So it's almost purely an anti-incumbent thing.
And I think
sorry, go ahead.
I think this is where voters are so frustrated with the system today and why there is that anti-incumbent sentiment, because you're going to have Peterson probably win with 52% of the vote, by winning by a close margin, and that's not what the majority of the people in Nebraska want. And so I think that plays into this anti-incumbent sentiment that you're seeing in Nebraska and across the country, where you have to run to the left or run to the right in a primary, and that's not truly reflective of how people feel.
Well, and I wouldn't discount the idea that this is still a wave election year, and the energy for elections is still on the Democratic side, even in Republican states. In an off-year election where the Republicans control everything, it's going to make me interested to see whether Sarah Slattery gets an infusion of money from some of the Republicans who are not Peterson folks.
Yeah, that would be fascinating. Oh my goodness. Who would have thought? Aaron, let's switch gears to the governor's race. Just thinking about what you said, Josh, about this anti-incumbency. Several of our guests have mentioned tonight about just door knocking and how dissatisfied people are with state government and seemingly the governor and his performance. Here we have a Democrat candidate with Lynn Walls, who I know I've gotten to know Lynn really well through the years, and she's no wide-eyed liberal. Let's put it that way. And Ryan Horn, who was with us earlier, Aaron, talked about the difficulty still in the red state Nebraska, even in a Democrat year, there is still that stigma of the Democratic Party to get over. So, and
then the shadow of Brett Lindstrom.
Exactly. You guys were kind enough to report on that story that we broke here with Brent, and I'm convinced he's going to run.
Yeah, I spoke with the governor tonight, and he seems very confident, but he says he's not taking anything for granted.
Yeah. Josh, have you followed?
Yeah.
I assume you have some thoughts.
It's an interesting cycle, very interesting cycle. And, I'm looking at how the U.S. Senate race between Osborne and Ricketts affects the governor's race. I think that if I'm looking at it from an Osborne and Walls perspective, the better Osborne does, the better Walls probably does. And so, I think we will see some things in the cycle that we've not seen any time in recent history, whether that means upsets in either of those races happen. I just think it's going to be competitive, and that's unique, right?
Yeah.
It's been a minute.
For a long time.
Yeah, to say the least.
To have competition, though, I will say, is good for everyone. And I think that's, we talked about themes and discontent in the countryside about the status quo. I do think it's that's partly because of this view of like the politics has become a monopolized system. And I think there's at least somewhat of a recognition that's not producing results that are benefiting people. So competition's good.
Yeah, and the thing to watch tonight, and I was talking to someone who has forgotten more about politics than I have, and he was telling me that the number to watch is how far under 80% are Pillen and Ricketts, because if they're under 80% in their primary, it's usually a signal of the kind of discontent that happened in the 90s and made some of those wins possible.
Did you dig into that latest poll that the Osborne people are touting? Talk about that, Aaron.
We looked at it a little bit. We haven't reported on it yet. I just have some real high standards for polling. I need to see the questions before the head-to-head to say anything about that.
Yep.
But what I would say is it's not crazy if you're just out and about in the state that they have quite a few supporters in places and pockets where you wouldn't expect it. Some of the old Herbster supporters that you would think are diehard R's are still up for grabs for Osborne. And when you see the polling numbers, the number that stood out to me in that poll, and I'd love to dig into it a little more, was the amount of Republican support for him. Anything in double digits is significant.
Yeah. Any other races, Aaron, that you're following before we cut you loose here?
Sorry, the other one I'm really just kind of watching with just a unique bit of interest is the 3rd district race. Every once in a while, the 3rd district gets angry at its incumbent. And I don't know that they're mad at Adrian, but like even Virginia had those years where it was a little bit rough. And I keep kind of watching that. I mean, anything over 33 is significant in the 3rd. Now, I think this number will settle out as the rural counties come out. But, you know, 64-36, Adrian's going to win, Adrian Smith, the congressman out there. But the support for, is it Hubner or Hubner? He's definitely a capable candidate. And, you know, you've seen out there, sometimes they just want to tell people they're mad.
Yep. Yeah, we could do story time. You know, I knew Virginia. I always tell the story, me and when I was working for Dave Carnes and we did our bus tour, there was a World Herald reporter and a handful of others playing cards with Liz Carnes in the back of the bus with Virginia Smith. And so anyway. Anyway, those were the days.
They were.
Yeah. Well, Aaron, I'm deeply appreciative of you jumping on here in your crazy evening and giving us a taste. Again, just kudos to you and your team and the work that you guys do day in and day out. You're doing journalism in this state the way it should be done. And I know you guys work your butts off every day, and I appreciate it very much.
Well, thank you guys for having me. You guys do great work too, and sorry to talk so much. I've got to go get some stories edited, or I'm going to be talking to you from the unemployment line.
Aaron Sandiford, Editor-in-Chief, Nebraska Examiner. Thanks, my friend.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, we've got a few minutes here before we hopefully get some more numbers here. I think we've got a couple more guests that are going to join us. But in the meantime, gentlemen, what strikes you about that CD2 race that, again, just the money that's going to be spent, the eyeballs that are going to be on that race, because this now becomes a national race, right? There's going to be money spent on that race that we maybe have not seen in Nebraska for a long time, maybe ever.
I think the impact is even higher now than it was even a couple weeks ago, with the Supreme Court ruling, with the gerrymandering that's happening in the Deep South and taking away Democratic-held seats. The Supreme Court of Virginia striking down their redistricting plan. It just means it's that much more competitive, and you're going to start seeing more and more money in districts like Nebraska too, than even what we would have expected a few weeks ago. The map has really became smaller over the last few weeks.
Yeah. Mr. News Director, you got anything for us?
No, we are still waiting on more results. I'm curious to pick this question with the panel here.
Yeah.
What do you guys make of the first district race with Chris Bachamire showing very well and getting, I think, the earliest call of the night that he is presumed to be the victor?
That was surprising, and from my perspective, to see that spread. I anticipated it to be a closer race than it looks like it's going to be. Knowing, Eric Moyer grew up in Madison County, had some presence in other parts of the district too. That surprised me. Brandon, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, I think what you're seeing is that money matters in politics, and people can say that money doesn't matter and shouldn't matter, but the results of that are clear. Bachmeier raised more money. He was the one who was doing mail and other tactics towards voters. Moyer was running more of a grassroots campaign. It's not all that surprising knowing those trends. I mean, it goes back to the CD2 race where Kavanaugh had a huge advantage to start that campaign. But the money came in, and people were concerned about the unintended consequences of Kavanaugh vacating his legislative seat, and Powell made a race out of it. So, a lot of people, especially on the Democratic side of the aisle, say they don't like the money in politics, but the money in politics is what's moving the needle right now.
Yeah. Well, and again, I got to know both those candidates, and I thought they were very strong, and they're really strong candidates, and they both ran competent races. But you're right, Chris outraised Eric by a large margin, and ran a good campaign.
And interesting to see how much he carries forward, how much cash he carries forward into the general, which will be, a challenge to start over, to raise money to face a very robust opponent.
Well-funded, very good campaigner. I mean, Mike Flood is no rookie for sure, and that'll be interesting.
I think it'll be real interesting to see if District 1 gets elevated with the changes in the landscape across the country, like I mentioned. Some of the polling that's out there, that's public information, right? Like Trump is under 50% approval rating in District 1. That's going to have ramifications, and, to be seen what happens with that.
Yeah. Okay, Brandon, we're going to kick you loose, and thank you very much, because we've got another guest we're going to
Thanks
bring
for having
on.
me.
So
Really
the chair is Brandon. Thank you. Brandon Beyer, One House. We appreciate your good work. And hey, welcome to the stage, if he's ready, Mr. Brent Comstock, candidate for University of Nebraska Regents. Stop by and say hello. Mr. Brent Comstock, welcome to the stage.
Wow, I feel like I'm in the hot seat now. Got the mayor emeritus of
leave?
Norfolk. Yeah, man.
Well, welcome, first of all. Should we look at the numbers from Mr. Comstock's race?
Yes, we will.
See how we're doing, and maybe we can dig into a little bit.
Looking pretty good.
Looks like you're doing pretty well.
We like those numbers.
Those are good numbers.
I like them.
What an interesting race. And now, obviously, you both move on to the general election, but that's a pretty big margin.
It's indicative, I think, of how people feel about where they want the future of the university to go. We had an event down the street, and it was comprised of former faculty, former staff, former university leaders who want the university to be that economic engine, but also the thing that people smile about outside of just game days, in the classroom, at the Lead Center. So we feel good. We're proud. You know, my mom's over there. She's telling stories. Maybe glad she's telling those after people cast their ballot. But we feel good.
Well, and again, you've been around this game a long time, but first-time candidate, and your opponent also first-time candidate. And so, yeah, I think, how does and Tim Clare has been a long-time occupant of that seat here in Lincoln.
Yeah.
And Ryan Horn, our Republican consultant that we had on earlier, he made the observation that it helped me out, whoever heard that. Maybe it was Chase, maybe you heard him, but because I want to get this accurate, I think Ryan, the way Ryan referred to it is, that's a difficult race for a Republican to do well.
Well, we'll find out in November.
Because you're a registered nonpartisan.
Lifelong nonpartisan independent. I think that there's a lot of noise about what that is to different people.
Yes, well, it's become kind of popular.
It's become something, and since I was registered to vote, I've been registered nonpartisan, and I think really strongly these are nonpartisan races.
Yep.
And I have said for 10 months now that we don't care about the letter behind people's names. What we're focused on is how do we increase in-state, out-of-state, and international student tuition, because we have an enrollment challenge and we have a budget challenge, and we need to be focused on that.
Well, and I think that's one of those races where people don't necessarily look at the letter behind your name.
They shouldn't, really. It should make no difference. And I
Yeah.
don't see like that, much like our municipal races and county races, I would argue, should be that way as well.
Yeah. And we've put together a great coalition. I mean, we've got the left, we've got the middle, we've got the right, we've got the mayor, we've got Coach Tom Osborne. We've got a great group of people. And I think there is this illusion from outside sources that we're like concocting this magic endorsement roster. These people care about young people living in this state. They don't care about, is that left or right? And I think that stands to show with what's there, but more importantly, the work that we're going to do between now and November to make sure that we seal the deal.
Yeah. This is, again, one of those seats that's down ballot, doesn't get a lot of attention, but truly, first of all, it's a 6-year term.
Long time.
And, I just think it's one of those, one of the most important positions in our state, to shepherd that budget and all the policies for our flagship university system. And it's an important role.
Yeah, it's important, and there are 8 board members that control $3+ billion budget that has a $6 billion economic impact in the state. And if you've read the news in the last year and you've thought, program cuts, I got a question about that, or NIL, or Nebraska medicine, all of those decisions eventually make their way to this board that is largely, out of the spotlight. And we're one of 4 states that has this elected position. In most states, it's appointed by the governor and the legislature, or a combination thereof. So it's Michigan, Nevada, Nebraska, and Colorado elect the leaders of their public higher education system.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I think those people probably don't realize that.
I'll keep talking to him. Tomorrow at 7 a.m. when we convene the campaign team for our daily meeting. Sorry, everyone. Yeah, it's important. And I think we've had thousands of conversations at this point, and we feel like we're doing the right thing.
Well, we've worked together. I've known you a long time, but you got out in front of this race before your opponent even showed up. And no fault of his, but you decided to run for this seat, and you didn't sit around wondering what to do next. And again, just that list of endorsements, everyone from Tom Osborne to Mayor Lyrian. I mean, that's quite a coalition to put together. So.
Yeah, and I think the most important people in that coalition are the faculty, students, and staff. And we've talked to them, we've met with them, we host listening sessions. We've committed to quarterly public town halls if and when elected. And so we're gonna keep doing that, because that's what transparency and accountability and all the other things that people say when they run for seats like this, we're gonna make sure that we do it.
Yeah. Very good.
I have a question for Brent, if
Yeah,
I can
please.
hop in.
Yeah, Chase,
and
jump in.
As you said, I think the university's budget this election cycle is going to probably take up a lot of the oxygen of the race. Do you anticipate differentiating yourself from your opponent in regards to how to address and solve that budget crisis the university is facing?
Yeah, I think we're focused on differentiating ourselves from the status quo. I mean, the challenge with a board of 8 people is that you've got to have 5, really, 4 if you want to just be stuck in neutral, but you've got to have 4 other people to be on your side if you want to move the needle in any direction. And I give credit to people like Tim, who's held that seat for 18 years, people like Jim McClurg, Bob Ferris, Chuck Hasselbrook, that have those individuals that regardless of the letter behind their name, they've endorsed us. I think the thing that we will think about doing differently is how do we uphold and make sure that that shared governance piece where you've got faculty decision bodies and administrative decision bodies and then the governance decision body, how do we make sure that we are hyper transparent about that, about the process? Because that's what I have heard from hundreds of people, that they weren't surprised by cuts. They're not surprised by future cuts. The decision and the process to do it seemed very behind the scenes. And whether or not that's true, that's what voters and faculty and staff feel. And it's our job as a governance board to make sure that we change that perception.
No, very good. Well, Brent, I know you've got work to do.
We got work to do and 2 more things to go to after this. I didn't know that campaigns were awake after 10 o'clock, 9:56 and 39 seconds. But Josh will be here all night long. Yeah. Well, thank you, guys.
Brent Comstock, thanks for stopping by. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Looks like a sizable victory tonight.
Thank you both. Good to see you guys.
Yeah, you bet.
Thanks, Dan.
Okay, well, we've got about 4 minutes here before I think we can look at some new numbers. And Josh, whenever you want to get the hell out of here, I'm not going to hold you because I know that you've done some yeoman's work here. So
Can I interrupt with some breaking live election update results?
Yes, please.
As you look at the screen here, we are seeing John Kavanaugh and Denise Powell tied at 38% each. Only about a 200 vote difference between the two, with John Kavanaugh leading.
we may be here a while. Well, this race may be here for a while. And Crystal is not getting, yeah, so it's obviously a 2-person race.
At this point, it seems it's interesting to see people are voting for James Lucien still. His name still appeared on the ballot despite him dropping out of the race earlier this season.
Well, and Van didn't get any votes.
Apparently 110, but 0% rounded
got 110
down.
votes. Anyway, well, that's been an interesting race, and he didn't say it, but when I talked to Aaron Sandiford earlier this week, he said that this race may not be decided tonight. So,
Well, it's looking that way.
it's looking that way. Interesting.
Shall we take a look at the Secretary of State's race, see if that has differentiated itself much? It looks like, I think the last time we saw it was 48-52, so it sounds as though Bob Evans has lost a percentage since the last time we looked.
That's just fascinating. And as Aaron pointed out, and Josh, you know this, as the Western Nebraska numbers come in, I don't see how Bob is going to gain a lot of votes if this is the trend.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, what's coming in is from the western part of the state.
I did not see this coming. I mean, I knew it was going to be a close race from everything I saw, but I did not see this coming.
I'll eat my hat on the issue. We were discussing prior to the show, I sort of dismissed this race because I figured, well, Bob's going to take it. And I was wrong.
No.
Yeah, and it's, I don't know that anybody could point to one thing that Bob, for all intents and purposes, he's been a pretty steady Secretary of State and fairly visible. But yeah, leads to a question of, there has been some of that playing around with ballot initiatives, things like that there's a perception out there anyway. And you wonder how much of that weighed into this, or if it's purely just residual from a MAGA anti-incumbent standpoint.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wait here for a minute to see what other numbers come in, but I can't thank our audience enough for tuning in. As we said earlier, Josh, thanks for hanging out with me.
Happy to do so.
Appreciate it very much.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, Josh Moenning, former mayor of Norfolk. When are you going to run for political office again, my friend? See, I'll put you on the
I feel
put you
pretty
on the hot
content
seat.
watching from the sidelines right now, but it gets in your blood and never quite leaves
Never
the bloodstream.
say never.
Never say never. So
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
keep my eyes open.
Yeah, very good.
All right, thanks, Dan.
Josh. Well, look, there's all kinds of people. Hi, Kim. Hey, Bruce. Thanks for stopping by. Well, the crowd is dwindling, and I think we're going to go through these numbers here one more time because I've exhausted my list of guests.
Well, the beauty, Dan, is the crowd is not dwindling on the wonderful world of the internet. We still have several dozens of viewers that are watching.
Healthy audience. Well,
right.
And again, I just want to take a moment to talk about our audience. And Chase, you've been on this journey with us now these last year and a half of this podcast. And so maybe this gives us a chance to dissect the work that we've done, the work that you and Ike have done,
Yes.
and then our new team with Chris and with Vince in the back room. This is a lot of work. And it isn't just this guy with his name on the board, because all I do is I book the guests and talk. And everything else is done by you and Ike. And tonight with Vince and Chris helping us. And so, with Miss Kim helping behind the scenes. And so anyway, I just wanted to take that opportunity to thank you for this and to thank our audience, because we have grown this thing from a little fledgling little idea that we had. Well, it started with, I guess, Pints and Politics years ago. But we feel we're at the right place at the right time to talk about politics in Nebraska in a way that maybe hasn't always been done. And our growth of our audience shows.
It really does.
Yeah.
It really does. And I think that we're doing something unique here, bringing this kind of coverage to the internet in a way that other media outlets in the state are catching up on. So we're kind of on the cutting edge here.
Yeah, I mean, talk a little bit about, we're broadcasting this on 5 different platforms?
That's right.
And every day that we're putting out content, that content is being seen. I always use the example, 2 of our most popular platforms, well, it's kind of a tie between our flagship video platform of YouTube, but then the social media channels of Facebook and TikTok. And that's where our numbers are. And let's face it, the Facebook audience isn't people your age.
No.
The Facebook audience is people my age.
Right.
But it rivals in many of our episodes, in our content, TikTok numbers.
Yeah.
And so it never ceases to amaze me of the content that people consume across all those platforms.
Definitely. And I'll even tie this back to a race that we've been following tonight, speaking specifically about reaching the youth, reaching the young crowd. And we did see several young candidates jumping in the race this season. And one of them here at home in District 2, and I have it on the screen behind you, Dan, that Jaden Speed, I believe, I can't recall his exact age. I think he's younger than I am.
Yeah.
I'm 27, so he's...
I think he's 22. Yeah.
And running for the legislature, an incredible feat. And frankly, he had a great showing for his relative age and experience. But Caitlin Knudsen seemed to take the Democrat win there. I'm not familiar much with Dean Helmick, but he seems to came out victorious on that race, which was held by a Republican incumbent prior to them being term limited. So maybe not shocking here, but I suppose if the Jaden crowd and the Caitlin crowd can come together, maybe Democrats could take District 2 this November. We'll have to wait and see.
There's going to be, and we're going to be, just to review, it's like we're having our production meeting in front of God and everyone.
That's right.
But yes, we are not only going to be following the major races in the state, CD2, CD1, the governor's race, but we're going to dive into about half of the legislature, a little over half. I think there's 25 seats that are up this year in the legislature. Now, we're not going to be able to cover all 25 of those. Some of them, obviously, Senator Conrad, doesn't have an opponent. And so, but we're probably going to focus on 6 to 10 of those races as best we can.
Yes.
In the months ahead.
And Dan, how do you see the partisan control in the legislature taking shape? I guess as of now, it's, I believe, 33. Republicans have 33 seats, which is the exact supermajority number. Democrats have been at that 16 for, I think, 2 years now. I don't think it's budged, or 2 election cycles, that is. I mean, with the energy that we've talked about tonight, with Democrats this November as a reaction to the federal government, how do you see that shaping the Nebraska legislature?
I do think it's going to trickle down. The old saw is all politics is local. By the way, shout out to the All Politics is Local Facebook page. Those guys are very kind to us and feature a lot of our content. But the national political scene will influence those legislative seats because Nebraska's not immune. I mean, we've done, our first episode of Dan on the Road talked about the challenges in the agriculture industry here in Nebraska. And, we're going to see that firsthand in these legislative races, how, these are difficult times for agriculture. We've had, of course, John Hanson on many times, president of the Nebraska Farmers Union, representing the small family farms across this state. And John has made the comment many times to us that this is some of the most difficult times in modern history, comparing it to back in the 80s, when it was really, some of the darkest days for agriculture. So, there's no doubt that national economic picture, the affordability issue, if you will, that's going to impact the Nebraska legislative races. There's no doubt.
Well, with that pressure in the more rural parts of the state, which typically lean Republican, do you think what we're seeing tonight with the Secretary of State's race is a microcosm of, I guess, what you're discussing?
Well, I think it can be. I think Ryan hit on this a lot of this I didn't really think of it as anti-incumbency, but that really is what we're talking about, because I mean, if the Democrats nationally are going to, and again, traditionally, the off-election years, whatever party is in power, the other party picks up seats in Congress, both the House and typically the Senate. And so will we see that mood in the Nebraska legislature? Again, if we're talking about affordability issues, there's no way gas is going to be cheaper today. By election in November,
who knows?
Than it is today. It maybe so, but most of the experts I've talked to and listened to, even if that spigot turns back on tomorrow in the Middle East with oil, we're still going to have high gas prices and fuel prices. And so that's going to be a factor. And tariffs are still causing havoc across the world. And the agriculture community is going to be impacted by that.
Well, and I find this year so interesting for Democrats, and this was even invoked in Brinker Harding's acceptance speech, that there's a lot of this aim being taken at the more progressive wing of the Democratic Party, which has now seemingly raised in prominence following the loss of Harris in 24. Now, what's interesting about that in Nebraska, John Kavanaugh, in a way, is probably on the progressive side of the spectrum when compared to his opponents in this primary. He received the endorsement of the Progressive Caucus. Now, I find that interesting. Of course, in Omaha, you could imagine a progressive ticket might hold more weight. But here in Lincoln, in the 1st District, Moyer was seen as the progressive.
Correct.
And frankly was more progressive than Kavanaugh.
Correct.
Arguably as progressive as Melanie Williams in that race. And we saw him become one of maybe the first losses of the night, which I find interesting. I think a lot of people were similar to Josh, thinking that progressive momentum would come through for Moyer there and at least make that closer. So I don't know what that says. Maybe a more progressive aligned message does win in Omaha, but it's not quite there in the 1st District.
Well, again, I go back to the Don Bacon model, and Don was able to build a coalition of moderates, moderate Republicans, moderate Democrats, and independents, and squeak out victory after victory in that district. And so it'll be interesting to watch. I'm interested in what's going to happen in this governor's race. And again, we've talked about this, talking about the possibility of an independent getting in that race of Brett Lindstrom.
Now, here's the question. If Brett gets in the race, do you think he shaves off more votes from Pillen or from Walz?
See, that's just it. I talk to people every day when we broke that story with Brent, painting a picture both ways.
Yeah. It really could go both ways. Obviously, Pillen has the incumbent advantage here. But I think, as Aaron alluded to, there's really no telling what the energy is going to look like in November. I mean, if anything, what we've seen tonight has been just a fraction of what that is really going to look like. And who knows what's going to happen federally and nationally, internationally in the next 6 months, coming back to the war. I mean, this could be a completely different race in 6 months.
I want to give a pitch and a thank you and a pitch to our Patreon supporters, Friends of Dan. Thank you for supporting the show. It's a way for our audience to financially, because let's face it, this costs money to put these productions together and to pay our good team. And so just a shout out and a thank you to our Patreon supporters, kind of the flagship entry levels, Friends of Dan. There's even a category of Dan's beer money.
That's
just so it's clear that money doesn't go to my beer fund. But anyway, it's a cute name.
That's right.
And so anyway, thank you to our Patreon supporters. If you're not a friend of Dan, please go over to the Patreon, because that's how we support this show. And to our also to our supporters, I want to thank, a couple of folks just didn't want to be thanked, and so I'm not going to name their names. I'm just going to say, Deborah, representing Team Omaha, thank you very much. Joe, representing Team Lincoln, thank you very much for supporting this project here tonight. Warhorse Casino has been a longtime supporter of this podcast. The Coffee Roaster, a new supporter and sponsor of the show. Panology Tech Solutions, go Darren. Anytime that you see you don't see the technical flubs when I'm trying to bring a guest on, and I run out of my studio and flag down Darren or one of his teams, and he helps. Of course, Parsons Public Relations, B Creators and Studio PH. Chris, thank you for your good help tonight. And of course, Vince with Coffee Roaster, thanks for your great work. My thanks to Senator Danielle Conrad, Ryan Horn, Aaron Sandiford, Josh Moenning, Brandon Beyer for your support and talk. That's what this is about, is talk.
That's right.
And Chase, thanks for your good work as our executive producer. And Ike Simonis in the back room is our producer in the field here tonight. And so what a great team. This has been a fun night.
It has been fun. We maybe have roughly 15 or so more minutes before we sign off for tonight. It seems like we'll miss the last dump of ballots, which is unfortunate. I think we were all kind of hoping that at least the CD2 race would look decided by this time tonight, and it is evidently not.
So I wonder if the Secretary of State's office is a little slow?
Who's to say? Yeah, it could be. You know, Dan, coming back to a race that we haven't talked about tonight, I have this on the screen for you, is District 28. We did have former Senator Patty Pansing Brooks on our show.
Yeah.
This is the race to replace the now leaving incumbent, Jane Raybould.
Yep.
And Patty is obviously winning that race very, very strongly. I imagine that is, I believe, kind of a fun fact for any legislature nerds out there. This district is the one that encapsulates the state capitol building.
Yes.
So it's that kind of downtown near south area of Lincoln. And we'll see how this goes. I've been curious to see how Patty maybe tries to differentiate herself from Jane, given that Jane seemed to leave on not the best terms.
Yeah, and I just want to say I've known Jane for a long time. In fact, she was one of my very first guests on Pints and Politics. And I forget who we paired her. If any of you want to look back at the catalog of Pints and Politics, what a fun project that predates you, Chase. But, you know, we did that 13 years ago. And the premise was pretty simple. I like craft beer. And I like talking to politicians. And so we would pick a Nebraska craft beer and either the brewer or the owner of that brewery, and they would bring a beer, and then we would pair that beer with a community leader or a politician. And we'd, you know, the old saw that, you know, what's the best way to get to know your elected leaders is to sit down and have a beer with them. So anyway, 13 years ago, we started that podcast. People didn't know what podcasts were back then. Now, literally everyone and their dog has a podcast. But anyway, Jane Raybould was one of my first guests on that. And Jane, you know, has had a wonderful career in public in public service, Lincoln City Council person, and now 4 years as a Nebraska state senator. And but she went out by, you know, pissing a few of her constituents off.
It was controversial. Her decision to introduce legislation that would alter the voter-approved minimum wage issue that passed in 2022. It's very controversial, so much so that now our city council here in Lincoln is actually trying to get in the mix, and now our attorney general is also getting in the mix. So there's plenty of story there.
There is.
Dan, to direct you back to the results here, we have another incumbent who is not doing too well with Rick Holdcroft. And this was evidently a race that we need to keep an eye peeled for.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, an incumbent, again, this I guess, anti-incumbent tendency. What's this next race here?
District 38. This is the five-way race.
Yeah.
With Tim Anderson seeming to pull it off here. We still do have a little more than half of the precincts that need to fully report in. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times these votes or these numbers don't change a whole lot as those results come in.
Yeah. By the way, I didn't thank our hosts enough. Terry Hendrickson and Clay Naff playing host and hostess this evening. Thanks, guys. I appreciate it very much. Talk about community-minded people. Clay and Terry are it. Okay, here's the Suzanne Shore race for the District 4 Board of Regents in Omaha. I found it interesting that one of my guests said that, maybe it was Ryan, that said that maybe people don't know that Suzanne Shore is married to Pete Ricketts.
Well, you know, it's certainly something that politicos in the state remember and know from the years of her contradicting her husband as governor. I mean, obviously, not sharing the same last name goes incredibly far.
Yeah.
And what's interesting, these are nonpartisan races for the university regents. So, you know, it's so bizarre how partisan politics works in Nebraska with so many nonpartisan seats. You wonder how much political motivation is playing into this. I didn't realize this was going to be a 5-way race for District 4.
Well, and some of those folks have, some pretty good name ID, I think. I think some have run for this seat before.
Yeah. And for viewers, for context, this seat was given up after the sitting regent was sort of embroiled in maybe controversy is too soft a term, but a drunk driving incident that's alleged and still going through the court process right now. But she chose to resign her seat. Yeah. So this became an open race with Suzanne Shore going for it.
Yeah, because she was going to be removed from that office.
Most likely.
Yeah,
yes.
Stayed on. Yep.
Also of note here, Pete Ricketts said on the record to reporters that this would be his lone Democrat vote that he would be casting during this race.
It is interesting. We interviewed Suzanne, and delightful. I've met her in passing before, but that's the most time I'd ever spent with Suzanne. And, I was very impressed. And again, I was somewhat taken aback by some of the social media blowback from other Democrats who were not trusting that she was an independent thinking person from her husband. Some people just couldn't make that jump from being married to someone that these people disagreed with so much. But anyone who's, again, followed maybe her career as the former First Lady, she supports Democrat. She's been, as far as I know, a lifelong Democrat and has supported Democratic candidates and causes her entire career. Again, those odd couples that are able to have a relationship and still disagree so much when it comes to their public policy.
Certainly. Well, and it doesn't help that, Pete Ricketts is not exactly an unknown niche political figure in Nebraska, and he's been around a long time. People have their minds made up on Pete Ricketts from his governorship and now into his senatorship. What I will find interesting about this District 4 regent race is if, like you're describing, Dan, the lack of enthusiasm from Democratic voters for Suzanne Shore, if that exists, if that will hurt her in November. Because we're seeing, I think Justin Solomon was the Republican endorsed candidate there, who evidently it seems that those two, if these numbers hold, will advance to November.
Yep.
So enthusiasm, I guess, will become the question. Or maybe as we're describing, nobody even knows who Suzanne Shore is related to. And so she'll be our next District 4 regent. We'll see.
Yeah. Fascinating. What have I forgot to talk about? Hey, if I know there's a lot of you still watching, if you've got a question that's been burning in your belly to ask me, same thing goes with the audience here. Now's the time to do it, kids, because I'm getting a little punchy after 3 hours of this. Not punchy from my beverage, but just punchy from talking for 3 hours.
Okay, well, while we wait for maybe some final questions to roll in, Dan, here's another question for you. Are there any candidates who seemingly are not going to win this primary election season that you see a political future for? Such as a Kishla Askins, a Crystal Rhodes, and Eric Moyer?
Yeah. Well, I hope all of those folks, having gotten to know them very well these last few months, I hope they do decide to run for political office again, because very talented individuals, very impressed with a lot of those folks. And, not everyone has to run for a higher political office for their first round. So anyway, there's opportunities for those folks, and I hope they do continue on.
Yeah, anytime there's, like you're describing, a big race that these first-time candidates are trying to hop into, I'm always asking myself, did they get the bug for politics and now they want to run for a lower race, like state senator, or their local county board or their city council even. We've seen that with a lot of candidates that seemingly they want to stay in. I mean, remember the Omaha mayor's race with Mike McDonald? He expected to have a future, and things even seemed bright for him at the time. And now he's out.
Well, I think of my friend Jim Jenkins. Jim, cattleman from Callaway, Nebraska. His first run for political office was United States Senate against Ben Sass, and who was the Democrat? He ran as an independent, and the Democrat nominee was that Hasselbrook? No, Dave Domina. And everybody said at the time that Jim Jenkins was such an impressive, policy-minded, fiscal conservative, social liberal that he should run for another office. And so.
Yeah. Well, Dan, we have some questions for you from the chat. We got one from Mr. Bob here. He evidently asked it earlier. We apologize for missing it, but he's wondering about your analysis on whether Mike Flood has any chance in November against evidently Chris Bachamire.
You know, I just go back to the mood of the country. And the mood of the country is, I guess we'll use the word anti-incumbent. I think the mood of the country is to throw the bums out. And that's based on the economy. It's based on this war that we didn't need to start, and we did. And so I think any Republican is going to have a difficult time coming to terms with that mood of the country. Mike Flood is one of the most impressive politicians in my recent memory in Nebraska. Successful two-term, three-term, four-term Nebraska state senator. He served 2 separate terms. Just 3? Thank you, Kim. So he served, that's right, he served 2 terms and then came back and served 1 term. Speaker of the legislature was thought of as someone who was really able to bring coalitions together and build support for issues. And now, you know, a lot of people thought that Mike was going to be, was interested in running for governor. And he decided not to do that and instead ran for Congress and has ratcheted up his position in Congress. He now is a vice chair.
Chair of the Main Street Caucus. Yes.
And so, you know, Mike's a smart politician. And so, and this isn't, you know, that district, District 1 is not a purple district. It's a Republican district. And so I think it's going to take, you know, Chris Bachamire is, I've been, as we've said many times on this show, because we've talked to Chris a lot, he's an impressive candidate and with an impressive background, especially in foreign affairs. So in my opinion, without thinking about it too detailed, somebody could correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Chris could be one of the most, if not the most, formidable Democratic candidates for this seat in my recent memory.
You think that's the sleeper candidate that people aren't, maybe won't pay attention to, given what you're saying, that NE01 seems to be pretty safely Republican?
Yeah.
We got another question in the chat. This one's actually about a legislature race, which will be interesting to discuss. With LD 26 being so close in the last cycle, that's George Dungan's district in Northeast Lincoln. This chatter is asking, is there any surprise with Dungan's blowout win tonight? And I will pull up his win. I believe it was over 70% of the vote here.
Wow.
You know, I guess I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Dan, but I wouldn't say I'm terribly surprised. Yeah, Dungan's at 74% right now. I would not say I'm terribly surprised. George Dungan is a very active senator.
He is. He's everywhere.
He gets in the mix. I would assume he's well liked in his district. Well, yes, it was a close race, I think, in 22 when he was elected. I think he only won by a matter of a couple percentage points.
That's right.
But I followed the legislature at this time, and within the first year, after seeing how active he got, I sort of had a hunch that he would be around for 2 terms. And I think he's doing politics smart. He's plugging his legislation that he's gotten through.
Yeah.
For Democrats in the state, I think that willingness to filibuster bills is popular among Democratic voters, and Dungan gets in the mix on that. So I don't think he's made any missteps in his 4 years so far.
Yeah, in that district, help me out, Chase, but that district, whose district was that, Kim? Do you remember?
Northeast Lincoln, I think it was the former Lincoln mayor. Was it Don Wesley?
Oh, that was Don Wesley's seat. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, yeah, traditionally that's been a Democrat stronghold, but doesn't have to be. I mean, it's working class, it's Havelock. It's, it's railroad and kind of a blue collar, a lot of working families in that district. But no, I think George has done a pretty remarkable job, and that shows in the numbers. And a new dad.
That's right. Yeah. Congratulations to the senator. That's right.
Yeah. I think overall the Lincoln delegation of state senators is really impressive. We talked about Jane Raybould earlier with her challenges, but I just think overall the Lincoln delegation is really impressive. There's good folks.
Definitely. In our waning minutes here, we'll get some last little input from the chat here. We got Mr. Bob back in. He says he doesn't have a pulse on the entire district, but he was surprised that in 2024, Flood was the only national Republican and one of only 2 or 3 total Republicans who won in Lancaster County. He does seem to have the somewhat magic touch in this. I know you said it's a red district, but there's certainly purple aspects to it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
The Lincoln City Council is all Democrat, the county board, so forth.
Yeah, I mean, the district it has certainly become, certainly Lincoln has become more of a stronghold for Democrats. And look at the last few mayoral elections here in Lincoln. They haven't been close.
No.
And it doesn't matter what quality of candidate they run, the Republicans. I've said repeatedly that the last 2 mayoral races, the Republicans ran what I would consider a pretty strong candidate, at least on paper, this last time. And the race before that, 4 years earlier, I didn't think it was a very strong candidate. Same result. And one of those, the most recent one, spent a shit ton of money.
Yeah.
Same result. So obviously, the Democratic Party has been successful here in Lincoln. So.
Yeah. One more final chat on the same topic, again, from Mr. Bob. He said he just points out that Flood's Lincoln Town Hall infamously did not go well. A point to make on that, with Chris Bachamire seemingly winning the nomination, I think we're all going to be inundated with the clip of him confronting Mike Flood at that town hall, if it's legal to use.
Yeah. Before we get out of here, let's look at the CD2 race one more time, see if there's any new numbers.
Last we looked, it was still a deadlock at 38%, and there have been no votes that have been added in recently. So we're still at a dead heat between Kavanaugh and Powell.
Well, and for our audience, we reached out, obviously, to all of those candidates and told them as the night grew on that we would love to talk to them. They're probably not doing any media interviews, so it's not just us. Well, as we wrap up, again, I just want to thank the team. I want to thank our audience for sticking with us these past 3 hours. And we'll do this again.
In November.
Yeah.
That's right.
And some great content coming up in the weeks ahead. And again, just my sincere thanks to our audience for all the growth that you've been responsible for. So with that, I am signing off.
One more plug. If you really loved what we did tonight, chat and viewers, check out the Patreon, subscribe to the Patreon, become a patron, or just subscribe on YouTube. It all helps make this possible.
It does. Subscribe to YouTube. That's what makes the difference in our growth. So
That's right.
Thanks very much. All right. Good night. That's what it's like to talk for 3 hours straight.